The guy in the middle of the hall was named Tsukuru Sumeragi. He was assigned the position of chef and given a G rank. The auctioneer opened the bidding, but the crowd immediately declared that paying for him would be a waste of time. During the home economics class, everyone was trying to cook, but the attention of the female classmates was drawn to a handsome, blonde-haired guy who was confidently creating an appetizing dish. And it wasn't Tsukuru. Tsukuru Sumeragi was a slender young man with dark hair and eyes burning with enthusiasm. When he cooked, he became completely immersed in the process. Today, he had prepared 3 types of sandwiches: chicken fillet and wine, vegetable pâté, potato salad, boiled vegetables, and French onion soup. Tsukuru sighed in annoyance. It wasn't the first time he had spent so much time and effort cooking, only to receive almost no reaction from those around him. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to his classmate. What a beauty, he thought to himself. The girl's name was Ikenos. She ran up to him and praised him for his skills, and our hero became very flustered when he heard the compliment directed at him. Then Ikenos laughed shyly, saying that she was clumsy and that the others had asked her not to interfere. The young man couldn't believe that Ikenos was talking to him. At that moment, the teacher said he would be stepping out to the staff room for a bit and warned them to be careful with the fire. While Ikenos admired the dishes prepared by the young man, he had a strange feeling, as if something was about to happen. Suddenly, there was a rumble, a noise as if an earthquake had begun. Everyone in the classroom, frightened, started screaming. A moment later, all the students found themselves in a room with very high ceilings. Everyone looked at each other with surprise and fear, not understanding where they were. 3 figures appeared at the head of the hall, and the students themselves were surrounded by knights. The person standing at the head introduced himself as a representative of the Alliance of Kingdoms and called the students heroes, explaining that they had been summoned to their world through a special ritual. Then the blonde-haired guy exclaimed, "What's going on here?" To which he was told that they would now begin testing their abilities to determine which kingdom each of those present would belong to. Abilities were tested with a plate that showed one's profession and rank. After that, the heroes were distributed through an auction to 15 countries and kingdoms, where they were tasked with destroying demon kings. Suzuno Ikenos was asked to touch the plate. The plate determined profession Saint rank S. The starting price for Ikenos was 5 million, and immediately voices rang out, offering from 10 to 40 million. Then Tsukuru Sumeragi was asked to come forward and place his hand on the plate. The plate identified his profession as chef, rank G. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, no one showed any interest in Tsukuru. Nobody wanted to waste time or pay for him, and everyone indignantly demanded they move on to the next lot. The young man couldn't understand what he had done wrong. Then the auctioneer addressed Tsukuru, informing him that from that moment on he was on his own. He gave the guy some money and a sword, saying it was compensation and should last him for a while. He also added that they couldn't send him back to his world, and after he stepped through the gate, he would be transported to a random region. The young man couldn't understand why it had to be a random region. It was clear from the auctioneer's expression that it was difficult for him to talk about it. Soon, Tsukuru figured it out himself. None of the kingdoms wanted to accept him. Suddenly, Ikenos cried out his name. Several pairs of hands tried to grab her and stop her, keeping her away from Tsukuru. The young man, surprised, uttered her name and turned to face her. Sumeragi remembered that Ikenos had been bought by the kingdom of Lux Sandal, and trying to speak in a calm voice to reassure her, he promised that they would meet again someday. Ikenos, with a joyful smile, said, "See you," and asked him to say the same. Sumeragi, looking tense, approached the gate and was about to step through when the auctioneer suddenly pushed him, sending him falling into an abyss. Trying to slow his descent with his feet, the young man landed on the ground, finding himself in a forest. The auctioneer had tricked the guy. He wasn't in a random region, but in a forest called Borf. On the ground, Sumeragi found a status plate. Upon touching it, it displayed his data: name Guy, profession level 1 chef, skills cooking, ignition, butchering, detailed appraisal, and material storage. Stats: strength G, intelligence C, agility G, dexterity X, luck X. Sumeragi placed the plate against a tree, and it identified it as a multi-millennial large tree from the Borf forest, a mysterious place with no signs of human presence. Tsukuru decided to find food and water first. He knew he could start a fire and distinguish edible plants from poisonous ones, so he began to look around. During his search, Tsukuru found shiramaru mushrooms, which were delicious when fried. He put them into his storage so they wouldn't spoil and would always be on hand. Sukuru wondered why he hadn't encountered any monsters yet, and then he heard a rustle. He tensed up and drew his sword, but it turned out to be just an ordinary rat. In despair, Tsukuru burst into tears, realizing he had been abandoned in the forest despite his non-combat profession being known. In a fit of rage, he threw away his sword and swore to get revenge once he escaped. A rustling sound came from the bushes again. Sumeragi thought it was a cat, but then a beast with enormous claws, several times larger than him, appeared. The creature lunged at Tsukuru, who screamed and ran away. Only then did he remember the sword he had thrown away. As he ran, Tsukuru tried to find something useful, but his bag only contained mushrooms and berries. The beast struck him with its paw, sending the young man flying through the branches. The predator was instantly beside him, and Tsukuru, in terror, thought he was about to die. He remembered his desire for revenge against the old man and everyone who had abandoned him in the forest. Tsukuru decided he wouldn't die there and began repeating a single word: ignition. And finally, it happened. The monstrous creature burst into flames, and at that moment it pinned Sumerage's head to the ground with its paw. The brunette realized the monster wanted to destroy him to stop his skill. Thinking about what else he could do, he croaked, "Dismantle." And at that very instant, the creature was torn to pieces. As Tsukuru lay there, pop-up notifications began appearing before his eyes, announcing level-ups and the acquisition of the spring water skill. The young man lay wounded and bleeding. Trees and the sky flickered before his eyes. Trying to get up, he doubled over in pain and lost consciousness. When he came to, his entire body ached, but he was alive. Before losing consciousness, he remembered something and, as if asking himself, uttered in bewilderment, "Spring water." Bubbles of water appeared from an unknown source. The bubbles floated towards the young man. He opened his mouth and drank. At that moment, information about healing food popped up. A steak from the rib of a cat-like monster, very tasty, with the property of healing wounds. Somehow rolling from his back to his stomach, Sumeragi began to crawl towards the steak. Groaning, he reached his food and took a bite. If not for his current condition, he might have even praised the steak, as it turned out to be incredibly delicious. Swallowing the last piece, the brunette began to feel improvements, and all the wounds on his body started to heal. Finally, Tsukuru was able to sit up, and with immense relief, he realized he had recovered. Looking up at the sky, a spark of hope ignited in his soul that he would be able to escape this forest. The young man peered from behind the bushes, observing a huge skeletal monster. It was a Scythe Reaper, level 200. Having survived all the trials, Tsukuru decided to finally eat. A skill window popped up. Roasted rib meat from the large cat-like monster allowed him to gain night vision. Next, a notification popped up saying that the night vision skill had been learned. Sumeragi was surprised, not understanding why cooking would have such an effect. Then he realized the result depended on which body part the cooking skill was applied to. The sacrum gave him a sense of presence, the thigh gave him agility, and roasted meat gave him acceleration. Tsukuru understood that the more he ate, the stronger he became. Next up was a level 240 Bognon. After eating a wild monkey belly steak, he gained wood magic. Tsukuru could only think about food, as monster meat could give him the strength he needed to get revenge on the old men. He then ate a level 260 dark bat steak and gained air magic. Soon, a pack of hyenas prepared to attack him. Sumeragi tensed up, as each hyena was level 150. Tsukuru climbed a tree, summoned spring water, and poured it over the pack. He couldn't come down and fight, there were too many enemies. Suddenly, a huge black bear lunged and latched onto a hyena. Tsukuru froze, watching the scene unfold. While the bear devoured its prey, a window appeared. It was a level 210 hell bear. A second later, the beast sniffed out another victim. The bear roared and struck the tree, sending Tsukuru plummeting down. He screamed in terror, finding himself almost right in front of the monster's maw. Sumeragi didn't panic. He summoned spring water, dousing and distracting the bear, and then the brunette fell to the ground. Before the bear could attack, Tsukuru used wood magic, binding the bear with tree branches, making it vulnerable to attack. The young man began to use throwing magic, but after trying once and then a second time, the magic didn't work. The bear wasn't staying still either. It started to break free from the branches. Another second and the bear was free. At that very moment, the bear attacked the guy with its entire body, sending Sumeragi flying through the air like a doll. The bear didn't hesitate, piercing Tsukuru's stomach with its massive claws. Writhing in pain, he could only think of revenge and wished that those who sent him into this forest would experience the same thing. The only thing Tsukuru didn't want was to die in this forest. Gathering his last bit of strength, he decided to try one more time and activated dismantling. Wounded and covered in blood, Sumeragi lay among the bear's remains. He gained many levels and realized that he didn't need to say the skill's name aloud to activate it. Tsukuru decided to be more careful, as even with healing, such battles were too dangerous. He then ate the bear's meat and gained new skills: inhuman strength, fortitude, iron arms, and physical strength. While Tsukuru was eating, a new monster crept up on him, but he was barely surprised anymore. The battle repeated itself in the same way. Tsukuru was once again wounded and lay in a pool of blood, not understanding why he constantly found himself in such deadly situations. Lying on the ground and finishing his meal, Tsukuru complained that all his skills forced him to fight up close. Because of this, every victory ended with wounds, blood, and a huge expenditure of energy. After defeating the last monster, he acquired dark magic and was finally happy to have a skill that would help him fight from a distance. Then a notification popped up, granting him the title of pervert. The system explained that this title is given to those who don't even try to cover themselves, and Tsukuru's clothes were completely torn after all the battles. Tsukuru froze in anger and disbelief, seeing the pervert title in his status. He was now level 205 chef with numerous skills, including cooking, dismantling, material storage, spring water, night vision, acceleration, inhuman strength, wood magic, wind magic, shadow shackles, and dark magic. His stats had increased to Strength A, Intelligence A, Agility A, Dexterity X, and Luck X. 30 days, 8 hours, and 30 minutes had passed since he arrived in the forest. Sumeragi had grown stronger, defeating many monsters, including a sand armadillo, a wooden doll, and a soul eater, but he still couldn't find a way out. All he had left for clothes was a loincloth. Sumeragi felt terribly lonely. He longed for even a slime, a fluffy companion, a soft bed, a conversation, a hug, and normal clothes to make enduring all of this a little easier. Suddenly, something pulled his attention away from his thoughts. Tsukuru had seen this monster several times before and had always hidden from it, but now he decided to attack. The Scythe Reaper used movement, then struck with shadow shackles, but Tsukuru managed to fight back. The Scythe Reaper tried to escape, but Sumeragi used wood magic and grabbed it. Tsukuru then used incineration and presence detection. He realized that with each movement, the Scythe Reaper teleported approximately 150 meters. The Scythe Reaper continued to burn, and Tsukuru knew the flames wouldn't disappear until he canceled the incineration himself. Therefore, the monster's escape was no longer an option. Suddenly, the Reaper attacked Tsukuru from above, striking with its sword almost at his head. At that very moment, the young man activated dismantling. Finally, Tsukuru had clothes, a hermit's cloak. It made the wearer invisible to lower-level monsters, didn't tear, didn't get dirty, and protected against all types of magic. Now Sumeragi could forget about the pervert title. Approaching the Reaper's sword, Tsukuru realized he had once again been on the brink of death. He grabbed the weapon and tried to pull it out of the ground. But as soon as he touched the sword, it was engulfed in lightning, pushing Sumeragi away and preventing him from grasping it. Suddenly, a voice emanated from the sword, asking the brunette if he was a warrior. Tsukuru stood frozen in bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. The young man sat by the riverbank. At this point, he possessed quite good skills and was at level 210, but his status remained the same: pervert. He used his produce skill to cook something to eat, and suddenly a voice exclaimed, "Cool." The guy sighed with a hint of disappointment, thinking he would never have believed he'd be talking to a sword. Meanwhile, the sword continued to admire Sumeragi, saying it had never heard of chefs like the brunette. Recalling the recent events that had transpired with Tsukuru and this sword, which he had obtained from the Reaper he defeated, the sword asked him if he was a warrior. It had a task for the young man, and if the sword saw that he possessed the proper strength, it would allow him to use its full power. The sword asked the guy if he believed in God. Sumeragi scoffed. Tsukuru called the whole situation absurd, but the sword kept asking if he believed in God. The young man replied that he'd had to believe so strongly in the past month that he was already exhausted. The sword didn't understand his words, so Tsukuru explained that he hadn't believed in saints or gods before. But after being summoned, he was used, thrown away like trash, and only survived thanks to his luck. He had to risk his life for food, walk without shoes or clothes, and suffer from rocks, branches, and sleepless nights. Tsukuru burst out asking why he had to go through all of this. He decided that God allowed people to summon heroes, ignored the suffering of his servants, and through his inaction, brought him to his current state. In a rage, Sumeragi declared that he would punch such a god in the face. The sword laughed, and when Tsukuru started to say that it could stop him, the sword immediately replied that it had no intention of doing so. The sword leaped into Tsukuru's hands and called him interesting, promising to help with his revenge. Then, it asked the young man to imagine the form of a sword that would suit him. Continuing on their way, Tsukuru asked Kurakiri if there was a village nearby. The sword delivered bad news. They were in the very center of the forest. Sumeragi was stunned by what he heard. Suddenly, a hot breath was heard and Tsukuru saw a massive dragon. Kurakiri was thrilled, thinking the young man had deliberately come to kill the forest's master, while Sumeragi broke into a sweat upon seeing a level 300 imperial dragon. The dragon immediately attacked and Sumeragi barely dodged. Kurakiri suggested using him in battle, but Tsukuru didn't know how to fight with a sword and a fireball was already forming in the dragon's mouth. But it was too late. The dragon spat a fireball at the young man with all its might, sending him flying into a lake. After he hit the water, the dragon continued to circle above its prey. The guy lay unconscious in the water, and the sword kept asking if he was alive, urging him to get up. The dragon had already opened its maw to swallow Sumeragi. The brunette simply muttered how much he hated all of this and gritted his teeth. Coming to his senses, Tsukuru used dark magic and went underwater, hiding in the dragon's shadow. The dragon, having lost sight of the young man, continued to search for him. Meanwhile, the guy ate some recovery food, grabbed his sword, and ran away. The sword didn't understand where its master was running, but Sumeragi kept fleeing, realizing that he was no match for the dragon right now and couldn't kill it. The dragon, meanwhile, launched another fireball. The brunette managed to survive. He asked the sword if the dragon could find him if he used dark magic. The sword had no answer to that question, but the only thing it knew was that it had never seen anyone survive an encounter with that dragon before. The dragon soared into the sky and appeared above Tsukuru. The dragon began to create another fireball in its mouth. This time, Tsukuru used the iron wall skill. The young man could neither run away nor get closer to the dragon. He ate more recovery food and used dark magic. His plan was to remove his presence and then dismantle it. But it was no use. The dragon soon found him and landed a series of blows. The guy tried to climb onto the dragon's back, but it got furious and threw him off. The fight continued. Sumeragi used several of his skills, such as superhuman strength and iron wall, but he couldn't understand why the dragon kept finding him, even though he was using presence erasure. The sword explained that presence erasure wasn't working because his killing intent was too strong. Even though he was suppressing his aura, he had also activated dismantling, which still showed his killing intent. Tsukuru had no other choice but to transform his killing intent into love, and a moment later, the brunette managed to touch the dragon. With a joyful expression and a confident voice, he uttered just one word: dismantle. The young man in the black cloak with his sword floating in the air wandered through a rocky area when he suddenly stumbled upon a glass orb. Inside the orb were small balls, likely something like a fortune-telling game. Tsukuru approached the glass orb and spun it, hoping luck would be on his side. In the end, he got a black ball. Suddenly, the ball exploded, and white smoke filled the air. The guy started coughing, and then a notification window popped up, announcing that a skill called Equivalent Exchange had been activated. The sword called the skill excellent and explained that such abilities were usually rare. Tsukuru doubted that one skill could be considered lucky, but the sword told him to defeat the boss, wait for a new vending machine, and focus on leveling up his skills, including swordsmanship. Tsukuru and the sword cut down all the monsters in their path, and Kurakiri noted that the guy was getting better and better. The battles continued, and not only Tsukuru but also Kurakiri developed, gaining new passive skills. After the fights, the young man made sure to rest and take baths. While relaxing in a magical bath created with ignition and water gun, Sumeragi reminded Kurakiri that he had fulfilled his request. Now, the sword was supposed to help him get out of the forest, but first, it asked if he planned to approach people in his tattered cloak. Kurakiri was right. Tsukuru had bear hide, hyena fur, sheep's wool, and a bit of magic to make clothes. Now Tsukuru looked different, tall, dark-haired, confident, and properly dressed. He made a shirt from sheep's wool, a jacket from hyena fur, and a coat, jeans, and boots from bear hide. After that, Kurakiri advised him to use camouflage. Standing on the edge of a cliff and gazing into the distance, Tsukuru suddenly fell down. He didn't understand what happened, and the sword mockingly remarked that it was the first time it had seen someone fall exactly where they were looking. Someone in the distance was shouting to hurry up, not break formation, and hold their ground until the end. It was some kind of carriage with people inside. On the other side of the road, someone was saying they knew they hadn't come here to lose. Sumeraga's gaze showed anger as he realized these people were bandits robbing others. A brawl then broke out between the people in the carriage and the bandits. The brunette stood aside when someone called out to him. The young man was surprised they had managed to notice him. It turned out the princess was inside the carriage. One of the bandits asked her who she was talking to. Ultimately, the bandits seized the carriage, grabbed the horse's reins, and, cackling, prepared to ride off. The enraged young man stood in the road with a sword in his hands, while the bandits, singing songs, charged at him at full speed. With a single leap and one swing of his sword, Tsukuru decapitated several of them. The remaining bandits were in a panic, not understanding what was happening or where he had come from. The bandits started to break into the carriage. Inside, the princess was terrified and didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, the carriage door opened. Inside, the princess was being hugged and protected by her maid, and she saw a young man in dark clothes with a sword in his hands, darting around and dispatching all the bandits. The horses continued to pull the carriage. The young man stood on the roof of the carriage. All the enemies had been defeated. Kurakiri asked the young man how he felt, as it was his first time killing a person. The dejected, upset young man couldn't understand why it had been so easy for him to kill someone, and it tormented him. Just then the princess's people caught up to the carriage. A man, likely a knight, immediately asked who he was. Sumeragi silently turned and left. The princess's subjects immediately began asking if she was all right, all while watching their savior leave, not understanding who this young man was. Finally, Tsukuru reached a human settlement, but the residents were unusual. The girls and boys had animal ears: bunny, dog, fox, and others. Tsukuru's jaw dropped in delight. He finally felt like his life was starting to resemble something normal. Meanwhile, in a room resembling a royal study, the princess was recounting the events to her subjects. She couldn't believe that Tsukuru had appeared so suddenly, like a hero from a fairy tale, but the old man just laughed and said she had met a good person. At this time, Tsukuru was walking through the town, eating a bun and noting that there weren't many weapons here, but the ingredients looked good. Inspecting the local food, Tsukuru realized their staple was bread, pasta, and noodles. Seeing rice, he became interested, but a girl explained it was rare and advised him to look for it at the Sadal General Store. The young man found the store. Inside the store, Tsukuru was greeted by a young saleswoman with cat ears. He shyly asked about rice and was happy just to talk to someone after a long period of solitude. Kurakiri noted that if he liked the saleswoman, he could buy her. Tsukuru was taken aback to learn that slaves here were identified by a necklace around their neck. The girl led him to the warehouse and began to talk about rice, but Tsukuru was interested not in where it was grown, but in its varieties. He carefully examined the grains and realized that one variety resembled Japanese rice and the other was a type of egg rice. In the end, Tsukuru bought 10 bags. An old man approached him, introducing himself as the store owner. He didn't have ears, but he did have a tail. Seeing the large purchase, he greeted Tsukuru and asked where to deliver the rice. Tsukuru replied that delivery wasn't needed and, with a single motion, stored the bags away. The owner immediately perked up and started offering him everything imaginable, from food to slaves. The owner noticed Sumeraga's interest in the word slaves and insisted that he at least take a look. Tsukuru tried to refuse, but the old man kept persuading him. Inside the slave room were ordinary people, also protected by law. The girls looked more like typical maids. But the owner led him to another room, bringing him to a specific door. The owner explained that the cages held criminal slaves. They weren't protected by law. Instead of prison, they were sent into slavery to benefit society. He then pointed to a girl standing in the corner with her back to them. The girl sat with an empty gaze. It turned out she had previously worked as a sorceress in a wealthy nobleman's house, but after a child's murder, she was accused because she was closest to the crime scene. Sukuru was surprised that she was condemned simply for being in the wrong place. He asked the owner if he believed in her guilt, but the old man replied that he didn't know. The owner revealed that he had been a close friend of her father who had died 2 years prior. He called the girl kind and despairingly said that she was now facing execution for the murder. The old man began to beg Sukuru to buy her. He refused, not wanting to involve others in his plan, but the owner declared that without it, the girl would certainly be executed. Suddenly, Dokkum, a long-haired blonde, burst into the room, shouting that he wanted to buy the slave girl Kana. He then looked at Sukuru with displeasure and asked who he was. Dokkum told Sadal to deal with Sukuru later, but Sumeragi reminded him that they had already been talking and it was Dokkum who had burst in. Without letting him finish, Sukuru declared he would buy Kana for 100 million gold, astonishing both of them. Dokkum refused to accept this and still wanted to buy Kana. Sadal tried to stop him, explaining that the client had agreed to the purchase before his arrival. Dokkum grabbed Sukuru by the collar and asked how he dared to be insolent. They exchanged hostile glances. While the old man tried to calm Dokkum, Sukuru remained composed. Kurakiri asked if he was sure about the purchase, and the young man admitted he hadn't wanted to involve anyone but decided to destroy anyone who dared to get in his way. Sukuru told Sadal that he now owed him. The old man happily promised to repay all the good done that day. As Sukuru and Kana left, Sadal watched them go. He was able to assess the young man with his ability and was confident that he would protect Kana and that a bright future awaited her. It was raining outside and Sukuru sat thoughtfully by the window. He had bought Kana and helped Sadal but still paid full price, leaving him without money. Sukuru wanted to leave the city quickly, but now his plans had to change. First, he needed to earn some money. Sumeragi looked at Kana, who was sleeping soundly under a blanket, and decided to let her rest until she felt better. When it was time to eat, Sukuru began cooking. He rinsed the rice, sliced bread, and something was already boiling on the stove. After setting the table, Sukuru told Kana to eat as much as she wanted, admitting he didn't know the local customs. But then he was surprised. The girl didn't sit at the table, but on the floor, placed the plate on her lap and started eating with her hands. Sukuru indignantly took the plate from Kana, asking what she was doing. The girl only replied with 3 words, slave, food, on the floor. The young man didn't understand anything she said. The sword then explained that all criminal slaves eat and sleep on the floor. The young man said he didn't care about that and told her to sit on a chair and eat at the table and also not to eat with her bare hands. The girl didn't respond. Kana silently sat at the table, picked up the utensils, and began her meal. The young man noted that her eating manners were quite elegant, and her aura was different from the other slaves the old man had kept. Sukuru hopefully asked Kana if the food was tasty, as he was confident in his cooking skills. The girl ate in silence, and he wondered if the healing food would affect not only physical wounds but also her mind. Suddenly, tears streamed down Kana's face. The girl started crying harder, dropped her utensils, and covered her face with her hands. Sukuru didn't pressure her, only gently asked why she was crying. Kana lay back in bed and through her tears kept repeating Dolce-sama. Kurakiri decided her mind was starting to heal, but Sukuru couldn't believe it, remembering her former joyful smile. He wondered what had been done to her to make her so depressed. Recalling everything he had been through in recent months, Sukuru concluded that nobles were truly inhumane. Kurakiri sensed something and Sukuru realized they were being watched and were about to be attacked. He called the enemies insignificant, saying they couldn't even hide their presence, and determined there were 5 of them. A growl echoed from the bushes and one of the lurking attackers didn't understand what was happening. The next second, a bear appeared behind him. But the bear turned out to be Sukuru. He grabbed the masked bandit, didn't let him break free, and knocked the knife out of his hands with a punch. The young man in the bear skin grabbed the bandit, asking him who sent him. The bandit tried to run away, but the young man in black held him firmly. Pinning him down with his foot, Sukuru continued his interrogation, asking about their objective and who told them he was there. Finally, the bandit spoke, clearly terrified. He said he had no idea who Sumeragi was and that they were supposed to kill the red-haired slave who constantly walked next to the brunette. The bandit frantically insisted they knew nothing about Sukuru or the girl, otherwise they wouldn't have taken the job. Sumeragi angrily kicked him, sending him flying several meters. As he was about to leave, the bandit asked if he wanted to know who the client was. The guy in black silently walked away, already understanding who was behind everything. Sukuru was heading back to his home, unaware that someone was following him. In the morning, Kana woke up after a long, deep sleep and looked out the window. Sukuru sat there polishing his shoes, understanding that in the city, among people, he needed to look presentable. Then he glanced at Kana and thought she didn't even seem to have taken a bath. The girl was sleeping peacefully, and Sukuru decided her nightmares had finally passed. He wanted to cook something for her. Meanwhile, Kana was having a dream or a memory. When she worked in a wealthy nobleman's house, a little boy held her hands and told her to consider them her new family. Kana knelt before him and thanked him. Clutching his small hand, Kana smiled and said she was happy to work for such kind people. Later, Kana noticed a flower growing in the castle wall and said it would have to be removed. She carefully dug it out, replanted it in a pot, and placed it in her room. Suddenly, a breathless man ran to her and reported that the count's son had been attacked. The boy lay on the ground, covered in blood, and Kana froze in horror. Snapping out of it, she rushed to him, begging him not to die. Kana didn't understand why he was alone or where the attackers were, but she immediately said she would heal him with magic. Despite her best efforts to heal the boy, the bleeding continued because the wounds were too deep. Dolce coughed up blood and Kana couldn't do anything. He was dying. A blonde-haired guy ran over, saw the scene, cursed, and started asking what had happened, while Kana was hugging the boy's motionless body. The girl was in such a broken state, tears wouldn't stop flowing, and then accusations started pouring down on her. Everyone accused her of murdering the boy, claiming she killed him for money. She tried to defend herself, but no one listened. They handed her a letter supposedly written by her, luring Dolce. At this, Kana began to sob uncontrollably and scream that it wasn't her. The girl was sold into slavery. Her gaze became empty and tired. She ate nothing. Other slave girls forced her to eat, telling her she should be happy she wasn't beheaded for killing the count's son. She barely managed to take a few sips of the disgusting gruel. A slave girl sitting next to her with a scar near her eye said that if Kana didn't eat, she would eat her gruel herself. She added with a sharp gaze that if Kana didn't eat, she would die. Soon they would be sold and they would see nothing but hard labor and the whip. Burying her face in her knees and crying, Kana couldn't understand why they were treating her this way, what she had done wrong. Her thoughts were only of Master Dolce and that if he were alive, none of this would have happened. Suddenly, voices started coming from somewhere and someone said they wanted to buy her. She became curious about who bought her. At some point, a dark-haired guy preparing food extended a hand to her and told her to sit at the table and eat. Most likely, this was her new master. Food was on the table. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Kana wasn't hungry, but she couldn't disobey her master, so she forced herself to eat a couple of spoonfuls. After eating a piece, she suddenly had a strange feeling. Her master was saying something nearby, but she couldn't hear him. After taking a second bite, she suddenly had a vision. She saw a scene where a bloodied Dolce lay on the ground and she was sobbing, leaning over him, holding his hands. Suddenly, Dolce whispered with a smile that everything was fine now and that she shouldn't cry. A moment later, Kana woke up with tears in her eyes. Sumeragi was sitting and eating, counting money at the same time. There wasn't much money left and it would be hard to cover living expenses. Then the guy noticed Kana had woken up and immediately asked if she was hungry. She was incredibly hungry, eating about a dozen plates of rice and then asked for more. The happy brunette could barely keep up with the cooking. Then the sword asked if she was really human, given how much food she had eaten. The young man replied that it was helping her recover, that her face no longer looked so pale and she seemed more lively. Sukuru asked if it tasted good and she replied with a very satisfied look that it did. Kana's joyful and serene appearance made Sukuru's heart beat faster. Suddenly, Kana fell off her chair. The young man immediately rushed over to her and caught her so she wouldn't hit her head. He was puzzled about what was wrong with her, wondering if she had an allergy or if she had eaten too much or if he needed to tell her to stop eating. The poor young man didn't know what to think. Just then, the sword said she had fallen asleep, and indeed, perhaps for the first time in a long while, the girl was sleeping a calm and peaceful sleep. Kana was happily devouring everything. For breakfast today, there was toast pizza, an egg sandwich, Caesar salad, and grapefruit yogurt. It seems she likes everything, the guy said. The young man turned to the girl, saying he was glad she felt well, as if nothing had happened. Accidentally, the girl dropped a piece of toast on herself and stained her clothes. She wanted to use the well to clean her dress. But Tsukuru beat her to it. With a snap of his fingers, her dress and even her hair were clean. He also gave her underwear as a gift, remarking that she slept strangely. He also made a bra for her. She was absolutely delighted and asked him what country the underwear was from. Sumeragi sadly replied that it was most likely from Japan. Kana didn't know about Japan, but she remembered that when heroes were summoned from another world to defeat the Demon King, there was one hero no country wanted, and his name was… But the guy interrupted her again and introduced himself as the brunette. Kana was very surprised. The girl recognized him. She realized he was the one abandoned by the world, just like her. Joyfully, she introduced herself to him again as Kana and said she would be happy to follow his orders. The first thing Tsukuru asked was for her to show him the city. Walking through the city, Kana showed the guy all the sights, restaurants, parks, and the weapon shop. Then the guy told the girl that he was poor and that while she was showing him the city, he had been thinking about what business to open. He told her he was a chef. Kana was confused, telling him he couldn't open a shop as a newcomer with no connections. A moment later, the young man became alert. He had initially felt someone following them since they entered. He then asked her how they could get to Sadel's shop. Unfortunately, Kana remembered nothing about the shop since her imprisonment there. The guy looked at her with a little pity and said he knew where his shop was. Upon arriving at Sadel's, they were met by the same saleswoman as the first time, who immediately began calling for the owner. The old man immediately ran out, hugged Kana tightly, and cried with joy. He was so happy she was back to normal. Sumeragi immediately got straight to the point, saying he had come to ask for a favor. Sadel was upset that he couldn't help and tried to dissuade the young man, telling him that rice-based food wasn't popular in their town. A plate of onigiri sat in front of Sadel. Furthermore, there were too many cafes in the area and government approval was also needed. The brunette listened with a serious expression but first asked to try his food. Sadel looked at them and immediately saw the skills in each triangle. Every onigiri contained a skill, such as a 2-hour stamina boost or a 2-hour intelligence boost. Tsukuru added that he could make 100 of these a day. Sadel was thrilled. He immediately sensed a goldmine and offered his shop for sales. Leaving the shop, Kana and Sumeragi continued their conversation. Kana was worried about whether the sales would go well when two men in identical uniforms approached them. The young man recognized them. They were the people from the cart he had saved. The men introduced themselves as Rotchin and Goliath and asked Sumeragi to come with them. He asked if he could bring his slave, to which Rotchin replied that it might bring back bad memories. Sumeragi then directly asked Kana if she wanted to go, and she responded that it was only her master's choice. And then Kana said she would go. A butler greeted them at the entrance. As they entered the palace, whispers immediately began, and angry, judgmental stares followed Kana as she walked down the corridor. Sumeragi took Kana's hand and entered the study where the palace lord and his daughter were seated. The count introduced himself as Dingaro, and his daughter was Altelia's. He apologized for summoning the young man so suddenly. It was clear that Kana knew Altelia's well. The princess immediately approached Sumeragi and with an ingratiating look thanked him for saving her that day. She also looked at Kana and greeted her. The count said it was an honor to reward him. Two maids approached and placed 2 chests before the count. He continued, saying that these chests contained 10 million gold and a short sword with their family's initials, and that this was insignificant compared to his daughter's life. Sumeragi was very surprised. 10 million gold, he thought to himself, was 20 times the price of Kana. Dingaro continued, saying that as long as he kept this blade in this country, he would be considered his follower. Sumeragi asked him why he was giving him something so valuable. He then replied that he wanted to ask him for a favor. Dingaro said that Kana had killed his son, Dolce. Tears immediately welled up in Kana's eyes and Sumeraga's gaze changed, becoming sharp and angry. Dingaro continued, the whole story goes on, but he doesn't believe it, as there's no proof of her innocence. That's why he used his influence to change the death sentence to slavery and assigned her specifically to Sadel. The count said that everyone present here, namely Rotchin, Goliath, and Altelia's, believed Kana was innocent. Kana's eyes filled with tears of astonishment, and Sumeragi wondered what continuation Dingaro was talking about. And Dingaro declared in a loud voice that he wanted to find his son's real killer. Sadel burst in, pleased, and announced that yesterday he had completed all the arrangements for the onigiri to be ready for sale. He then enthusiastically began to explain his business plan, saying that they would sell each onigiri for 10,000 gold and possibly even 20,000. Next, they would need to increase the amount of food. All this time, Sumeragi silently ignored him. Sumeragi began to say that he no longer had any money. The old man thoughtfully adjusted his collar. Suddenly, the young man handed him a sword, saying it was a short sword. Sumeragi recalled the events surrounding how he acquired the sword, which Count Dingaro had given him, begging him to find his son's killer. Dingaro continued, assuring the young man that he would, of course, be rewarded, receiving 5 million gold as an advance and another 10 million gold once he found the culprit. Sumeragi pondered this and asked what would happen to Kana once he found the real murderer. Goliath replied that she would, of course, be cleared of all charges. The young man was delighted, thinking that the girl would then be able to remove her collar as it didn't suit her at all. Altelia's face lit up, and she told Kana that as soon as it happened, she should come back to work for them. Altelia's took Kana's hand and said she missed her terribly and felt lonely at tea parties. Looking at them, Sumeragi stated that he accepted their request. The Count was very pleased with the brunette's agreement, but Sumeragi warned him that he wasn't much of an expert in such matters. The old man and the young man continued their conversation, watching Kana chat carefree. Sukuru went on to say that the person who killed Lord Dolce might be nearby. The old man agreed there was a risk, so he told the young man that even if they left the city, Kana would still be in danger. The young man didn't want the girl to live in constant fear. The young man and the girl left the old man's shop. At that moment, the sword told Sumeragi that it seemed he enjoyed saving people. The young man replied that there were still people who believed in Kana, and he was sure she hadn't killed anyone, and he didn't want her to be the target of anyone's revenge. Suddenly, Kana turned around with a wide smile, waved at the old man, and ran after the young man. Once he resolved this issue, he could safely leave her in this city. Sumeragi and Kana arrived at the Count's mansion. They were greeted by a maid named Hannah. The brunette told her he wished to speak with Rotten or Goliath. Hannah informed them that Rotten was in the mansion but was currently speaking with his wife. Sukuru immediately pouted with a hint of envy, while Kana beamed and said that Rotten's wife Alice was simply beautiful, and that they had a son named Cloud. Hannah was leading the guests down the mansion corridor when suddenly that obnoxious blonde man appeared. He immediately started yelling, demanding to know what Sumeragi was doing there. The blonde man angrily and forcefully declared that this was Count Abuse's mansion, and there was no place here for commoners like the young man. Sumeragi retorted that it was even less suitable for those who shouted at the top of their lungs. The blonde man's face twisted into an angry grimace, and he lunged at the dark-haired young man with his fists. The enraged young man struck Sumeragi's face with all his might. The young man's expression didn't even change. The blonde man cursed, not understanding what was happening, and suddenly blood gushed from his hand. He screamed in pain. Dokkum couldn't comprehend how this could have happened, given his level 300 and S-rank stamina. After a while, a team of knights approached. Dokkum began to scream hysterically, ordering them to seize Sumeragi, claiming he had wounded him. The brunette, however, merely looked at him with contempt the entire time. Drawing their swords, one of the knight team members asked them to come along. Kana, unable to bear it, shielded Sumeragi with her body, protecting him. Sumeragi, who was about to draw his own sword, looked at Kana in surprise. Finally, Lord Rotten approached, asking what they were even thinking. Rotter continued, asking them what they were thinking, pointing his sword at their esteemed guest. Dokkum, with anger in his eyes, extended his bloody hand, showing it to Rotten, and asked how he could be a guest when this guest had smashed his fist and even broken his bones. Rotten didn't say a word. He looked at Sumeragi, but the latter just shrugged. Dokkum continued to brazenly lie, claiming he had tried to stop Tsukuru's attack. Rotten looked at Dokkum thoughtfully and said he couldn't believe that he had blocked Sumeraga's punch with his fist, because if the young man had truly wanted to hit him, his arm would have been torn off. Dokkum was flustered, replying that it was ridiculous, as he wasn't a demon. Then Rotten continued, informing them that he had seen the young man in battle twice and that he had killed all the bandits in the blink of an eye. Rotten asked Dokkum to apologize to the guy, at which point Dokkum became very aggressive, shouting that Sumeragi was at most level 20. Rotten just closed his eyes to this and asked the guys to take him to the infirmary. But Dokkum refused, so he was forcibly grabbed and dragged away. Rotten was very ashamed of Dokkum, and the brunette, even in this situation, thought Rotten had been too harsh. Suddenly, Kana's knees buckled and she fell. The poor girl was very overwhelmed. Sumeragi worried about Kana and asked for her to be taken to a room where she could rest. Suddenly, Rotten knelt before Tsukuru and Kana and apologized for everything that had happened. Rotten, with a confident look, said that he was indebted to them and that this time he would restore their honor. The young man, as if nothing had happened, said that he had arrived just in time and that he would like to speak with him. Hannah walked down the mansion corridor pushing a food cart in front of her. Her steps echoed throughout the hallway. As she approached the door, she heard voices loudly discussing something. Sumeragi loudly complained about how that piece of paper could be called a protocol. He sighed dejectedly and said that even a schoolboy like him could understand that the report was useless. The level of culture in this world is very low, he said aloud. The sword noted that someone had planned this, and the guy agreed, adding that someone very influential was involved. Sumeragi was completely lost in thought, standing contemplatively and wondering who stood out, who benefited from the Count's murder, why they chose Kana out of all the servants, whether it was a coincidence or if it had all been planned in advance. Hannah finally entered Sumeragi's room carrying a tray. The young man asked what she wanted, to which the maid replied that the princess had ordered her to bring tea and sweets for Kana. Kana sat in the corner on the floor, dejected, and apparently had no appetite. Hannah, seeing this, bowed and left. The brunette wanted to touch Kana's shoulder, but she suddenly cried out as if startled and pulled his hand away. Before Kana's eyes appeared the man who had threatened to arrest her for murder. The guy looked at her with surprise and concern. She apologized to him. The young man asked her not to worry. Kana, with sadness and worry in her eyes, said that it was a terrible story and that if she had been stronger, Lord Dolce would still be alive. Kana began to explain that when she ran to Lord Dolce, he was still alive, and if someone stronger had been nearby, one of them could have saved him. She was too weak as a mage. All the memories immediately flooded Tsukuru's mind of him being weak and thrown into the forest. Tensing up, he turned to her. He asked Kana if she wanted to become strong, and with tears in her eyes, she cried out that she wanted to become strong more than anything in the world. Then Sumeragi summoned all the food from the forest that granted skills and told her to eat. In a state of shock, she agreed, and as soon as she took the first spoonful, the wind magic ability was immediately learned. Kana was very surprised. Looking at Kana, the young man was surprised that he had given her so much magical food, yet she only gained 2 abilities and her level was 23. He continued to explain how to level up, but the girl interrupted him, asking him to focus more on the investigation than on her training. The young man stubbornly and confidently replied that he wasn't planning to put either of those things off. Then he whispered to her that he was about to tell her something, but she absolutely couldn't tell anyone else. The guy waved his hand, and at that very moment, everything around them darkened and was enveloped in black smoke. The young man summoned a ghost. A huge skeletal creature appeared. It was a destroyer necromancer. Kana was in deep shock. Meanwhile, the guy was already starting to get tired, as summoning required a lot of energy. The apparition turned to Sumeragi and asked him to bestow a name upon it. The brunette looked at it questioningly, and the apparition explained that this was necessary for it to follow his commands, so the guy named it Baize. Baize burst into satisfied laughter, thrilled by the energy he was consuming from Sumeragi. Tsukuru continued speaking, telling Baize he wanted him to do something for him. Then Baize clasped the guy's face with his bony hands and said that he didn't even need to ask. He already knew what was on his master's mind. Baize told him he would search and then disappeared. The young man was so exhausted and tired he had never felt this way before. Suddenly, Kana, seemingly overwhelmed by emotions, lost consciousness. There was a knock at the door. It was the princess. She peeked into the room and said she had sensed something dangerous inside. The guy assured her that everything was fine, then looked at her thoughtfully and remembered that in the carriage she had been very sensitive to sounds and presences. She also asked him not to call her princess anymore, but to address her as Eli. Kana appeared behind the guy and asked Eli what brought her there. It turned out Eli had heard about Kana's condition and wanted to invite them to the garden for tea. The guy and the girl walked through the garden, admiring it in awe. It was beautiful. A joyful Eli was happy to have guests in her garden, as it had been a while since they had any. She invited Kana to sit down, but Kana refused, saying she couldn't because she was a slave. Eli looked at her with such a sad expression. Kana remained standing. Sumeragi sat at the table, and Eli began reminiscing that in the old days she, Kana, and Dolce often drank tea in this garden. Sumeragi thoughtfully looked into his teacup. Eli, watching him, asked if the tea was all right and if he generally liked black tea. He replied that he did. He inhaled the aroma and took a sip, saying that the tea was indeed delicious, that it had a pure fragrance, and then, thinking to himself, added that it would be perfect if it hadn't been poisoned. The guy analyzed the remaining food and drinks on the table, but only his tea was poisoned. He wouldn't suffer from this amount of poison, but if an ordinary person had been in his place, they would have died long ago. Observing everyone around, he wondered who could have done this, Eli herself, by ordering a maid, or if the maid acted on her own. Meanwhile, Eli asked the young man about the investigation and how it was progressing. Sumeragi said that he had reviewed the report, but it was useless. The princess agreed with him, adding that the report did not include the testimonies of 4 people. Eli became even more serious. She recalled hearing her brother talking to someone before his murder. That person spoke quietly, and she also heard the clinking of armor. Soon after these events, Dolce was killed. The brunette exclaimed that no one had told him about this. Then Eli began to shout that she had told the knights compiling the report and that they simply didn't want to include it. No one wanted to believe that she could have heard something through the thick door. She lowered her head to the table and began to cry. Tsukuru couldn't decide whether to believe her or not. He already knew she had very keen hearing, but she might also be lying to him because the poison hadn't worked. That is, if Eli had prepared it herself. Suddenly, Sumeragi felt a gaze on him. He sharply turned his head and met the eyes of the maid, Hannah. She immediately looked down, and the young man understood everything. The young man once again summoned Baze and told him to investigate Eli's personal maid. The young man continued his investigation, thoughtfully resting his chin in his hand. He began to recall everything in chronological order. On the day of the incident, the count left the palace with Rot and Goliath. Before that, Eli heard Dolce talking to a man in armor. At the same time, Kana was cleaning the mansion walls. Afterwards, someone told her what had happened, but by the time she arrived, the killer was already gone, and Kana was too late to save anyone. Dokkum then found her at the crime scene. All this time, the guy was sitting in a tree watching Kana being chased by a tree monster and 2 cat-like creatures. As he had promised her, he wasn't going to stop training with her, nor was he going to stop his investigation. Before they started training, Sumeragi created some gear for the girl. She felt a bit awkward in it because it was extremely revealing. Turning to her, Tsumeragi asked if she hadn't said she was willing to do anything to become stronger. Their dialogue continued. He told her that Baze would handle the investigation for now and they would focus on raising her level. He said they would go train in the Ball Forest. Kana was surprised. She knew it was a very dangerous place and it wasn't easy to get into that forest. After she expressed all this to him, Sumeragi silently picked Kana up, and a short while later they were already in the forest. Kana began her training. Immediately, 2 cat-like monsters pounced on her, cornering her. She could only dodge and was extremely scared. The young man got rid of the monsters with a single blow. Sumeragi looked at her and asked if she truly wanted to become stronger. Kana, with eyes full of tears, said it was impossible, that she couldn't fight level 200 monsters. Sumeragi gave her a very stern look. Sumeragi turned his back to her and said that was it then, and walked away. Kana remained kneeling, silently looking at his back with despair. Suddenly, Dolce's face appeared before Kana, along with the entire situation that had happened to her. She cried out to him in a confident, loud voice that she wouldn't give up. Immediately, she used fire lance magic, and dozens of fireballs appeared around her. At that very second, her levels began to rise, and she watched the pop-up windows with surprise. The girl looked on in admiration and said that she had done it, and her levels wouldn't stop rising. The satisfied young man smiled, and she realized he had done it on purpose. He then told them they still had a long way to go, and this was just the beginning. Standing in the forest with his hands on his hips, the young man told the girl that if she ever took damage, he would give her health-restoring food. Kana looked at him in horror and, half jokingly, half seriously, said she hated him. Sumeragi carried the girl, who was asleep from exhaustion, in his arms. Kana had been running around the forest all day, raising her level. She had significantly increased her level from 25 to 158, so the brunette had to hide her status. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was Goliath who called out to them. He asked worriedly if Kana was all right. The guy replied that she was fine and just tired after training. Goliath, shaking his head sadly, continued, saying that ever since that incident she had been deeply distressed by her weakness. The knight then abruptly changed the subject, asking him with a sly smile what he was doing there. It turned out Goliath himself was patrolling the area, claiming a bear was roaming around. The knight put an arm around Sumeraga's shoulder and invited him to dinner, saying he would treat him at his favorite spot. As Goliath tried to decline, he suddenly became alert and told Sukuru to be careful, as many people from the slums had been wandering around that day. Goliath and Kana happily enjoyed the drinks and food to the fullest. Goliath asked Sumeragi why he wasn't eating or drinking. Sumeragi replied that he didn't think those on patrol should drink. The knight then yelled at him, asking how a person could call himself a knight if he couldn't wield a sword after drinking. Goliath then started to cry, apologizing to Kana for leaving her alone the day Dolce died. The young man asked him if all respectable knights worked under Dengaro, to which Goliath yelled again, saying that wasn't the case. Rotten and Goliath left the knight squad with Dengaro, taking several subordinates with them. The leader of the third squad, Gibbon, stayed with his men and the remaining men of Rotten and Goliath. Goliath slammed his fist on the table, unable to understand how Dolce ended up outside the gates with so many knights around. The young man concluded that there must have been many knights that day, making it difficult to identify who Dolce had spoken with. After the meal, the knight offered to escort them to the estate. Upon entering the mansion, they were greeted by Baze. Sumeragi asked Baze if he had found anything. Baze waved his hand and they suddenly found themselves in another room. Kana was surprised, and Baze explained that the place they were in was virtual, and he had recreated what he had seen with his own eyes. The young man and woman approached a portrait depicting a seated woman. Sumeragi looked at Kana questioningly, and she explained that the portrait was of Dokam-sama's wife. Baze then recreated Dokam's study. Suddenly, Baze waved his hands again, a drawer opened from the desk, and a letter flew out. The letter floated to the young man's hand. On the envelope, he read that it was from illyasviel. The brunette pulled the letter from the envelope, and he and Kana immersed themselves in reading it. To their horror, they read in the letter that Fuzel had entrusted someone to get rid of the child of this cunning fox. He swore to Dokam that for all his efforts, he would make him a baron. Sumeragi was amazed by Baze that he was able to find such crucial evidence. The young man handed the letter back to Baze, and it disappeared along with Baze. Kana was horrified by what she had read. She couldn't believe it. Dokam had been so angry with her for not being able to save Dolce, and all this time he knew the identity of the real culprit, yet he still arrested her. Sukuru placed his hand on her shoulder and told her to calm down. He then asked her if she knew anyone named illyasviel. She replied that she was sure it was the Count, and they likely had a lot of interaction and friendship with the Abu's family, so it would seem absurd if they had targeted Dolce's life. Sumeragi pondered this and summoned Baze again. Upon appearing, he immediately understood what his master expected of him and vanished at once. Kana, in a state of shock, slumped into a chair, unable to believe what was happening, as if it were all a dream. The girl suggested that Altelias might also be in danger, to which the young man replied that he couldn't say for sure yet. If they had been targeting Eli's life, she would most likely have been poisoned at the same time as him that day, or perhaps she was already in someone's hands. The only person definitely not involved in all this was the one insulted in the letter, Dengar. But until they knew how influential these illyasviel and Dokam were, no one could be trusted. Ordering Kana not to open the door for anyone, Sumeragi prepared to leave to gather more information on the matter. With a snap of his fingers, Sumeragi changed his gear back to his old hermit's coat. Morning had already subtly arrived. Suddenly, through the window, Sumeragi heard a rough male voice scolding someone for being late, and at the same moment, scolding another to swing his sword with more confidence. All the knights stood in formation when Sumeragi overheard two knights whispering about Captain Gibbon being a very strict man, and how they wished they were under the command of Captain Rotten or Captain Goliath instead. Captain Gibbon appeared to be a stern, bearded man, and he wasn't from the beast-human race, which was why he acted so desperately. He didn't want to lose to the other two captains. The whispers continued, mentioning that he was the one who remained in the castle when Dolce-sama died, and after the death of a certain Messiah-sama, Dokam took the place of the chief wizard. The guy continued to eavesdrop on the two knights' whispers. It turned out Dokam had been promoted and his group had gained the upper hand. Messiah-sama's only daughter, Kana, had become a slave. Some also rumored that Messiah-sama's death was no accident and that Dokam had eliminated him. The gossip's topic suddenly changed and they moved on to onigiri, saying they were magnificent. Sumeragi smiled broadly upon hearing about his own production. Walking down the corridor and pondering how many people were connected to Dokam, a ball suddenly rolled up to him. Sumeragi saw a small boy who ran up and picked up the ball. Suddenly, Tsukuru remembered Eli's words that Dolce was always engrossed in playing ball, and that he had even broken a tree branch once. This must be Dolce, the brunette thought. Just then someone called the boy by the name Cloud. The boy shouted to his mom that he was coming and ran towards her. Tsukuru watched him go. He then met Eli's gaze. She greeted him, and behind her stood a girl and the boy. The young man approached, greeted her back, and asked Eli to introduce the people standing nearby. She said the girl's name was Alicia, and she was Rotten's wife, and the boy's name was Cloud, their son. The boy bowed and introduced himself again, while Eli continued, saying that after Dolce's death, Cloud had started coming to visit her and her father quite often. Smiling sweetly, Eli said that Alicia was also the niece of her father's friend, Count Erich Fusel. The guy immediately tensed up upon hearing the familiar name. Hannah knocked on the door, and receiving no answer, she said they were about to have breakfast and that she had already sent a maid to call Sumeragi and Kana, asking if she would like to join them. Deciding to get to the bottom of things, the young man asked Eli if she socialized and dined with her knight's wife and child, and if they interacted as master and servants. Eli smiled and replied that it wasn't like that. It turned out the Rotten family was the main branch of the Ebbas family, and for many generations they had served at the head of the royal squad, with Rotten's father currently being the acting head. Sumeragi then continued, meaning they were the closest relatives of the Ebbas family, and if Dengar didn't have children, then Rotten or Cloud would most likely become the heirs. The guy didn't hesitate to ask the next question. Was it possible that Eli and Cloud would marry and lead the Ebbas family? Eli and Cloud both blushed from the unexpected question. Cloud immediately started stammering, saying he wasn't worthy of the princess, that he wasn't educated enough, and that he was younger than her, still just a child. Eli playfully remarked that in 10 years he'd be a handsome young man, and maybe then her father would agree. Suddenly, the young man noticed a wicked smirk on Alicia's face, as if she was plotting something. Everyone gathered in the dining hall. Count Dingaro arrived, and they all greeted each other. Hannah bowed and said she had gone to Kana's chambers, but Kana hadn't answered her. Sumeragi sat next to Eli, looking bored, and Eli was very upset that Kana couldn't make it. The sword told Sumeragi that he hoped Kana hadn't been killed, to which Sumeragi replied that she wasn't weak enough to let herself be killed by some maid. Moreover, if she had been killed, he would have definitely noticed. Hannah approached the brunette and asked for permission to pour him water. Tsukuru looked at her warily but allowed it. After analyzing all the food on the table for poison, his glass of water was once again poisoned. As Hannah poured the water, she was trembling, and Sumeragi stared at her with a cold gaze. Then Eli asked the young man if anything was bothering him, to which he replied no. Count Dingaro said that since everyone was gathered, it was the perfect time to ask a question. He asked Sumeragi about the progress of the investigation. Alice surprisingly asked what investigation he was referring to. Dingaro explained that they had entrusted Mr. Sumeragi with investigating Dolce's death. Suddenly, Alicia clapped her hands. The guy didn't quite understand her emotions, they seemed unnatural. Answering the Count's question, the young man said he hadn't reached any conclusions yet and had just found a lead. The Count was encouraged by this, and Eli said it sounded promising. Cloud caught up to Sumeragi and asked if he could help with the murder investigation. The brunette immediately asked if his mother had ordered him to ask about it, to which Cloud replied no. He confidently stated that when he grew up, he wanted to become a great knight from the Ebbas family, just like his father. The boy continued, saying that Altelias and Dolce were like a brother and sister to him, and clenching his small fists, he declared that he would never forgive whoever killed Dolce. Clasping his hands in front of him, Cloud said that Altelias might also be in danger and that he wanted to protect her. Tsukuru suggested he protect Altelias, and that the best way would be to stay close to her. Entering the room, he saw Kana sleeping and drooling. He thought, how much can one sleep, and poured water on her, adding that they were going to Sadel's shop. Upon arriving at the shop, the slave salesperson immediately took Kana aside and said Kana needed a new outfit because her current one was too revealing. Sumeragi tried to stop her, saying Kana was comfortable in it, but the salesperson was adamant. The girl happily dragged Kana away. The young man then seriously addressed Sadel, asking him to look after Kana, as he was about to get down to business. The guy stood looking at human bones with Base behind him. Base asked him if he was sure these were the ones who killed False. Moving closer, the young man smelled the same bloodlust emanating from these human remains that he had felt at the crime scene. Base said they were likely killed elsewhere and brought here to feed the beasts. The young man said they couldn't present just bones as evidence, so Base told him to leave everything to him. Entering the room where Kana was, he found her looking so beautiful in an exquisite dress. The guy was a little flustered at the sight of her. The slave girl said that everything suited her, but it was best to choose something comfortable to move in. Sumeragi immediately agreed to buy her the dress, which cost him 100,000 gold. Leaving the shop, Kana was so happy. The guy asked her why she wasn't wearing it now. She said that Sumeragi himself bought her the dress and she would only wear it on the most important occasions and that she would cherish it. Sumeraga's cheeks immediately turned red. Walking home, Sumeragi and Kana passed an alleyway when a guy suddenly ran out of it. The guy had white hair and was wearing a mask. He ran up to Kana and stabbed her in the side with a knife. The guy was terrified for the girl, shouting her name. He looked at her and saw she was fine, not a scratch on her, thanks to her clothes. The masked guy jumped back from the couple, not understanding what was happening or why the girl wasn't hurt. In addition to the guy, a couple more knights approached, telling them they would kill them. Because the masked guy tore the dress her master had given her, tears welled up in Kana's eyes. She was so upset that she hit him with all her might, sending him flying a few meters. His partners immediately rushed to his defense. They were about to attack her, but it was no use. She told them syllable by syllable that they were weaklings. Creating a fiery spear, she attacked them, and most of them were defeated. One of them tried to use air magic, but he didn't stand a chance. Kana used wood magic, and he was sent flying. All the attackers were bound by branches. The girl asked them why they had attacked them. The guy answered for them, saying the attack was probably due to the investigation. Sumeragi summoned Baze again. Baze handed the letter to the brunette. He showed her the letter and said that with this, they had proof. There was a loud thud in the corridor and a crash against the wall. The doors burst open and Dokkum stormed into the office, enraged, shouting about how they had found the real killer of Dolce. Rotten, Goliath, Gibbon, the princess, and the count were in the office. Goliath immediately put Dokkum in his place, reminding him that he was in the presence of a lord. Sumeragi smirked and waved his hand at Dokkum, asking if his arm had healed after his attack on Sumeragi. Dokkum's face contorted with anger. Dokkum stared at Kana, who shivered at his gaze. She lowered her eyes and calmed down a little. Dingaro said he had gathered everyone Sumeragi had asked for. Tsukuru asked Rotten where his wife and son were. Rotten replied that his son wanted to protect the princess, so he allowed him to train with the squad. He offered to call him, but the young man said there was no need. Everyone stared at Sumeragi, waiting for answers. Tsukuru said he would explain everything, but first they had to swear to keep silent about what they were about to see. Of course, everyone immediately agreed. The guy waved his hand. At that moment, Base appeared and everyone instantly froze in shock, while Gibbon immediately shielded the count. Gibbon yelled at the princess not to approach, but Altelias said she had felt this spirit many times before and that he posed no threat. Base bowed to the princess and thanked her for her understanding. He introduced himself as Tsukuru's servant. Suddenly Dolce appeared. Base had summoned his soul. A shocked Altelias ran over, wanting to touch the boy. Sumeragi explained that it was Dolce's soul, summoned by Base, which was why she couldn't touch him. Altelias couldn't believe it. Sumeragi asked the princess to ask the boy a couple of questions that only she would know the answers to prove it was truly Dolce. She asked him what color the ball was and he replied, bright green. Then she asked his deceased mother's name and he answered, Monica Abus. The boy apologized to the princess and the count for leaving them so soon, and tears streamed down their faces. Dolce said he wanted the princess and the count to live long lives. He explained he could only exist in this form and asked them to listen to his will. All the subjects burst into loud sobs. The brunette interrupted them, urging them to continue. The count looked at Tsukuru with slight irritation but allowed him to proceed. The young man immediately asked if Kana had killed him. Kana and Dolce exchanged glances. No, the boy confidently replied. Dolce continued, saying it was a group of 3 strangers. He was told Kana was waiting for him outside, and when he went beyond the wall, these 3 surrounded him. After the attack, all 3 left, and one of them returned with Kana. Kana had been desperately trying to save him the whole time. The count asked Sumeragi who these people were, but then Dokkum started to interfere, asking them not to believe the thing he had summoned. The count immediately gave him a sharp look and told him he was currently speaking with Sumeragi Dano. The guy answered the question, saying he had discovered they lived in the slums. The count immediately wanted to send Goliath there, but the young man interrupted him, telling the count to hear him out completely. The young man said they were no longer in the slums or the city. Then Dingaro shouted, asking if they had escaped. The guy waved his hand and then appeared. 3 ghosts appeared. Kana immediately recognized one of them, the one who had led her to the crime scene. Rotten, Gibbon, and Goliath also recognized them. These were the people who had testified against Kana in court. Dingaro instantly drew his sword and, shouting, tried to attack them, but it was pointless. They had been dead for a long time. The Count was furious, completely beside himself with rage. He couldn't accept that his son's killers were already dead. Sumeragi then asked for permission to finish his report. The young man stated that he had identified the true culprit. Sumeragi questioned both parties. He asked Dolce, who had approached him by Eli's room, and told him that Kana was waiting outside the walls. Then he asked the 3 assassins who had ordered them to kill Dolce. Sumeragi said, "If that person is here now, point them out." All 4 simultaneously pointed. They pointed at Gibbon. Everyone was in shock, staring at him. Gibbon immediately started making excuses, claiming he knew nothing about it and that it was all part of the brunette's plan. Rot and Goliath, with stone-cold faces, said they would hear him out later. Gibbon yelled, asking why they didn't believe him. Gibbon took a step back, about to flee, but it was no use. With a single sword strike from Goliath, Gibbon was already on the floor, defeated. Goliath told him that his attempt to escape only confirmed his guilt, to which Gibbon replied that he was innocent and was only following orders. Suddenly, Gibbon screamed as if in pain. A second later, his head exploded into pieces. Everyone started looking at Goliath, asking him what he had done, but a moment later, they all realized it wasn't his fault. Dokkum had cast a spell on him. Goliath began to tell Dokkum that Gibbon couldn't do anything anymore. Dokkum spread his hands, explaining that the spell takes some time to activate. Sukuru told Dokkum that he could have cancelled it then. Dokkum countered by saying he might have gone berserk again. To this, Sumeragi, launching paper airplanes, remarked that Dokkum was indeed an idiot. Sumeragi summoned Base again, and Base in turn summoned the recently deceased Gibbon. Dokkum's face paled, contorted with bitterness and despair. There was nowhere left to run. The young man turned to the Count, asking if he had any questions for Gibbon. The Lord closed his eyes, then asked what Gibbon wanted to say, who had ordered Dolce's murder. Gibbon replied that it was Dokkum. Gibbon continued, explaining that for Dolce's murder he had been promised a higher rank than Goliath and Rotten. Dokkum's face twisted into a malicious grimace. A moment later, he took Hana hostage, holding her by the neck and threatening to kill her the same way he killed Gibbon. Everyone stood frozen in shock. Sumeragi, with a smirk, asked if he was really going to hide behind the life of a maid. Rotten Goliath added that he had killed a person of noble blood and the life of some servant was worthless. The princess, however, pleaded not to harm the maid. Dokkum continued to hold the maid hostage, and the maid begged them not to think about her, saying she wasn't as good a person as the princess thought. Dokkum yanked her with all his might and started yelling at her to stop talking. Hana began to confess that the criminal had threatened her and ordered her to kill Sumeragi and Kana, but all her attempts had failed. She screamed for them to ignore her and kill him instead. The Lord shouted Rotten and Goliath's names because Hana was moments away from death. Rotten jumped up and kicked Dokkum's arm, sending Hana flying, and Goliath caught her. Immediately, the traitor started whining that he was going to die and that his arm was injured. Dokkum began threatening the maid, telling her to do something, anything. The Count approached him, looked down at him, and asked if he had planned Dolce's murder. Dokkum, true to his deceitful nature, began to apologize with feigned deep regret. He claimed he had accidentally killed Gibbon and that the whole thing was actually Gibbon's trap. With unceasing malice in his eyes, he argued whether they would really trust a maid and some stranger who summons souls. The Lord started yelling at him to stop making excuses, saying it was useless, and then wondered why Sumeragi was fooling around at such a moment. Meanwhile, the guy launched another paper airplane. Eli looked at it and saw that something was written on it. Eli unfolded the paper and began to read. She read that the letter was addressed to Dokkum. Picking up the paper airplane near his foot, the Lord also unfolded the sheet and was shocked. This letter was from isekai. Dokkum, drenched in sweat, started yelling, asking how he got that letter. Sumeragi asked him if that meant it was a confession. The brunette began to piece together the puzzle, explaining that the man behind all this was Count isekai. He was the one who ordered Dokkum to kill Dolce, and then Dokkum told Gibbon to stage the crime and lure Dolce out. The rest of the plan was entrusted to someone else, and suddenly, Tsukuru summoned another letter. The young man began to read an excerpt from the letter. It stated that the plan was to stage a robbery of the Altelia's carriage and kill her, and to subjugate the Abu's family by someone from the Fusel lineage. Sumeragi finished reading and said it was addressed to his dear niece, Alicia. Poor Rotten immediately clutched his head, unable to believe that his own relatives were involved in this. Cloud entered the room looking grim and announced that his mother wanted him to marry a Lighteress and become the successor of the Ebis household. His father responded that he had already told his mother that the eldest son, Dolce, should be the heir. Cloud firmly stated that he didn't want to be a count. He dreamed of becoming a knight like his father or grandfather. When he grew up, he would become a great knight and protect the Ebis family, its citizens, and his mother. Sumeragi turned to Rotten asking what all this meant and if he knew anything. Rotten was confused and realized this was no joke, and he thought of Alicia. He rushed out of the room. The princess called after him and ran to follow. The others were stunned and tried to stop them. During sword practice, the son noticed his father, but his father didn't pay him any attention and called out to Alicia. Rotten asked her if she was involved in all of this. At that moment, the princess ran up and called his name. He told her that she had left him no choice, and as a knight of the Ebis family, he was obligated to kill her right then. The husband raised his sword against his frightened wife. Rotten lunged at her with the intent to kill, but at that moment, Cloud stepped in front of her to protect her, got wounded, and collapsed to the ground. Seeing his son lying motionless, he was scared but remained unyielding. The knight stood menacingly holding his sword aloft, looking at his son and wife. Cloud, meanwhile, couldn't understand why his father was doing all this. His father ordered his son to step aside or he would have to kill him too, but Cloud refused. He reminded his father that a knight's duty is to protect the weak. Just then, the princess ran in, screaming and begging everyone to stop. The knight sharply told her it was dangerous here and ordered her to stay away. He raised his sword, ready to strike, but his son's gaze, full of courage and determination, made him stop. He faltered, dropping his sword, unable to kill them. His father knelt and asked his son for forgiveness. The son felt both pain and relief simultaneously. Rotten apologized to the milord for failing to kill his wife and then brought his sword to his own neck. He declared that he would atone for his guilt with his life and slit his own throat right in front of everyone. His son was stunned. Cloud jumped up and ran to his father, calling out to him. His father lay motionless, covered in blood. The milord ordered someone to call a healer, and a knight immediately ran to fetch one. Kanna and the hero watched from a distance. Kanna looked at the hero and realized he wasn't going to do anything. She ran towards Rotten, but she was told that with her level, it was useless. She began to chant a spell and shouted words of healing. At that moment, a flash of light appeared on Rotten's body, so bright that it illuminated the entire castle. Everyone was in shock. Everyone was astonished that Kanna had used high-level healing. The hero knew she had been training, but he hadn't expected such a feat. Cloud fearfully asked about his father, to which Kanna replied that he was fine, just unconscious. Cloud cried tears of relief. The milord then turned to Alicia. He said that Fusel, Alicia's uncle, had planned Dolce's murder. Alicia was frightened and begged for forgiveness, explaining that she only learned about it after Dolce's death. Her uncle had told her she had no choice but to make Cloud the heir of the Ebis family. The milord was furious. My lord shouted to his loyal knight, Goliath, to begin preparations for war. The knight immediately ran off to follow the order, but Dolce stopped him. No one understood why Dolce had stopped him. He tried to explain that war would only bring sorrow to the people. He stated that he didn't want to see the people of Alguria suffer because of him, and he didn't want a war to start. He recalled how Sumeragi had summoned him and told him Kanna was framed, which is why he returned to save her. Dolce then asked if his father hadn't thought the same thing. His father agreed that he wanted to save Kanna and find the real culprit. Kanna was stunned, but Dolce interrupted her, saying that Sumeragi had already told him everything and he thanked her. Dolce said that thanks to Kanna's persistence, Rotten's life was saved and that she had no reason to cry or apologize. He asked her to smile, and through her tears, she did. As a farewell, he said he was glad for the chance to say goodbye to everyone. He asked them to protect the city and the people he loved. Dokkum was furious that the Messiah was dead, Conan was exiled, Abiz's child was dead, and all that was left was to get rid of Conan, who had become a slave. He thought that if that guy hadn't come to their city at all, and snarled in anger. Sumeragi wasn't there because he wanted to be. The The sword suggested that since the matter was closed, it was time to go and kill a certain bastard along with his god, and he agreed. Carefully removing the collar from Kanan's neck, his father's old friend told her that she was now completely free forever. He added that he had prepared new clothes for her. Seeing them, Kanan was stunned, as it was the very same outfit that had been torn when she was captured. She was told that Lord Sumeragi had mended and reinforced them, and she was deeply moved, hugging the clothes. The Lord thanked the hero for his service and informed him that they had apprehended 20 people who had been working with Dokkum. Now, the Aba's family had half as many members. He also added that Rotten had resigned, stating he was ready to take full responsibility along with his wife. Sumeragi added that it would be better not to start a war. He wasn't planning on fighting anyway, as Dolce had already stopped him. Instead, he wanted to accuse the conspirators of attacking the royal family, even though the existing evidence wasn't enough. Since Irich had been involved in dark dealings for a long time, the Lord wanted the hero to find more evidence. The hero wasn't thrilled and asked again if they really wanted him to continue the search or what. The Lord confirmed it. Lord Dingara asked for help one more time and promised to pay 30 million in gold. The hero didn't care, but the sword was delighted, as that money could buy a house or even two. He thought it would be better for it to cost money than lives and agreed. The Lord was very happy and was counting on him. Sumeragi placed a stack of papers on the table, which astonished the Lord. He didn't understand what they were or where they came from. He explained that these were proofs of Isekai crimes, detailing his illegal trade, slave trafficking, and the production and distribution of drugs. The Lord asked where these documents came from and if the hero could control time. The hero replied that he had already asked Bez to help him find them. He also asked for payment for the work done, and the Lord immediately paid him. The hero also wanted to clarify things regarding Kanan. The Lord replied that her room was ready, and if she wanted to return, they would be more than happy. The princess joyfully took Kanan's hands, congratulating her on her return. Kanan thanked Lady Elitaris and asked if she was tired and if she would like some tea or anything else. She added that she was ready to return to work at any time. Althea said that her father was likely still away and she could return to work after the paperwork was processed. They entered the room together, and before Elitaris could call her father, Kanan began to apologize. She said that she wanted to go with the hero, although the princess and Sumeragi didn't understand why she was saying this. The hero said that their agreement was concluded and they owed each other nothing, but Kanan wished to go with him or for him to make her his slave again. She said that she would be very lonely in this city without him. The sword agreed with her. She also added that he was lonely too, as she felt betrayed when she hated everyone. Therefore, she didn't want to leave him alone. She asked for permission to go with him. Sumeragi asked if she knew what he was going to do. She replied that she didn't, but assumed it was something terrible. She was fine with that. Even if the whole world and God himself became his enemies, she wouldn't turn away from him. Just as he once saved her, she also wanted to repay him in kind. He asked if the others agreed. The princess was shocked and scolded him for not seeing that she was worried about him. Why was he making the girl blush and say such things? The Lord remembered how he fell in love with his wife, how they got married and swore eternal love. They didn't care what others said. It was a wonderful time, and the hero said he would have to leave Kanan if she slowed him down, to which she agreed and was very happy. The Lord was talking about several troubles she might face when there was a knock at the door. The butler, a warrior, and Hannah entered with them, and she wished to go with Lord Sumeragi. But he didn't understand why she wanted to go with him, as Hannah had tried to kill him. The Lord explained it was due to her difficult fate, adding that although she had tried to poison Lord Sumeragi, she had already suffered punishment. But the truth was that she was innocent in a sense, as Dokkum had taken her sister hostage and blackmailed her. Knowing this, the Lord decided to give her a chance. By dedicating herself to Lord Sumeragi, she could atone for her sins. The princess defended her, saying she only did it for her sister, but he didn't really care, so he asked his slave for her opinion. She hesitated because Hannah had attempted someone's life but ultimately approved, stating that Hannah would work hard until her death. Perhaps no one would ever buy her freedom or help her as they had helped her. This was cruel, so if Lord Sumeragi refused, she would try to buy Hannah herself and look after her as a servant of the Ibis household. He agreed to let her follow him, but only on the condition that she would not disobey him. He asked if she had any issues with that, and Hannah readily agreed. At that moment, Hannah knelt and swore her loyalty to Lord Sumeragi for the rest of her life, much to Kanan's delight. Zadal was shocked that Kanan was to be made a slave again, even if only formally. He reminded Sumeragi that violence and coercion were strictly punished in this country, and that he wanted to maintain contact with him and monitor what happened to Kanan. He threatened that if anything happened to her, he would find him no matter what, and in response, he received a promise and a request not to worry. He also asked him to be careful when leaving the city, and that if he ever needed anything, he could always come to him. Sumeragi said he understood everything and would be careful, but they had something to do before leaving. The Lord asked Lord Sumeragi for one more favor before he left, concerning the army. After losing so many men in Rotten's departure, the troops' morale was low, and Goliath couldn't lead the army alone. Although they didn't want to start a war, they wouldn't be able to defend the city if attacked, so he asked Sumeragi to train the army in military arts. Additionally, he wanted to see his son again. Cloud approached his father's door, knocked, and said that Grandma had brought food, but there was no response. Someone knocked on the front door. Cloud opened it and saw Sumeragi with Kanan and Hannah, which surprised the young man. The hero entered the house and asked where Rotten was. The son replied that his father was upstairs in his room. He went up, broke down the door, and saw the surprised warrior sitting and looking at him. Rotten was astonished as he had increased security and ordered no one to be let in. To this, Sumeragi replied that the security was too weak. And since his subordinates were weak, he had to make them stronger. Rotten didn't understand what they wanted from him. How could he train anyone if he himself had been expelled from the army? The hero gave him no choice and dragged him along. The hero dragged the warrior behind him, and all the onlookers were shocked. But Kanan told her son not to worry and to trust her mentor. Rotten followed him, not understanding what was happening, but when he saw the warriors waiting for him, he was stunned. Everyone rejoiced at his return and complained about how difficult it was without him. Even Goliath admitted that things were better with him around. Now that neither he nor Gibbon were there, all the responsibility fell on him, and it was tough. He was told that the Count and the Princess were awaiting his return, but he replied that he was to blame for Lord Dolce's death and was unworthy of serving the Iba's family. Kanan asked what the hero was going to do now, but he was angry. He didn't understand why he had to help anyone. He himself had survived in the forest, wallowing in the mud, and now listening to a warrior give up seemed like a mockery to him. He remembered his childhood friend who could annoy him just as much. Goliath asked why the hero wasn't leaving. Sumeragi replied that he had had enough, and tomorrow everyone would go with him for training. He also asked the former captain if he could at least do that, informing him that training would begin at dawn in the Great Borf Forest. In the capital of the Sunset Kingdom, Luke Sandal, the heroes were training. Some were annoyed by this and looked at the heroes with displeasure. But even they weren't as omnipotent as others thought, because Ikenos healed them every time they were injured, but her powers were also depleted from constant use. They were suddenly transported to another world, and since then they had trained every day until complete exhaustion. They didn't understand why they had to fight the Demon Lord. Ikenos' legs gave out, but Miki managed to catch her and scolded her for working herself to exhaustion. Suzuno said she could only heal, unlike the others. Then she remembered Tsukuru, wondering how he was doing, what he was doing alone, and no one knew where he was. Miki noticed this and asked if Suzuno was still worried about him, and then immediately asked if he was her boyfriend. To which Suzuno immediately replied that he was just her childhood friend. Miki said that he was most likely fine, as his luck was rated S level. She advised Suzuno to first clean herself up and do something about those dark circles under her eyes, because she's such a beautiful girl and should stay that way. Her prayers were with him and served as a protective charm. Sumeragi and his warriors had already arrived in the Borf Forest, and he watched their training from atop a cliff with his maids. Kanan worried if the warriors would be okay since they were left with predators. But the hero replied that they were soldiers and had to prove they deserved their share of bread. Hannah asked if she should join the training, but the hero said he had other plans for her. They would leave the warriors there and go rescue her sister themselves. They approached Fusel Castle, looking at it from a distance. Kanan asked if her sister was being held there, and Hannah wanted to go with them if her lord didn't mind. He replied that since it was her sister, of course, she would go with them, as they were simply there to retrieve her, given she was being held hostage. Hannah thanked her lord and they activated their stealth skills. Kanan, however, had no such skills and was amazed at how they vanished. The wolf girl explained that for her, as a wolf, it was normal, so the hero gave her his hermit's cloak, which had camouflage abilities. Kanan was curious why the guards couldn't see them, as they had entered the castle so easily. The place was so dazzling it hurt her eyes, and in the middle of the large hall stood a golden statue of the master. The hero said he had terrible taste, and the others agreed. Sanya had already told her sister about it, but she didn't think things were really that bad. She guessed her sister must be somewhere nearby, and Sumeragi agreed. He called Bez, and the Reaper confirmed that Sanya was in the basement. He also added that there was no place he couldn't find. Going down the stairs, they saw a cage where Sanya was being held. Her sister anxiously started looking for keys, but the master said it wasn't necessary, as he would open the cage with his hands using his strength skill. Hannah tried to wake her sister, but it was no use. Kanan offered to heal her, but the hero stopped her, as using magic might draw attention. Sumeragi suggested they get out of there first, but upon seeing Hannah's sister, he was stunned. Looking at the unconscious wolf girl, he uttered the name Ayumi. The girls didn't understand what he meant. His life had been a complete mess. Just when he thought he had found happiness, it fell apart. The second time, he thought he would finally achieve happiness, but it crumbled again, leaving nothing. And finally, when he thought things couldn't get any worse, this time they stole the world he lived in, his freedom and his right to live. At least that's what he thought until he saw the wolf girl who looked so much like Ayumi. As it turned out, someone was watching them with great interest through a mirror. It was a deity who admired him. She was worried about what had happened and what to expect next from Sumeragi Tsukuru, because her world, the high plane of heavens, was always filled with an atmosphere of dignified health. A long time had passed since her younger brother Susanoo was banished, and she began to rule this world. There were things she regretted, but it was all for the sake of this world they now enjoyed. Suddenly, alcohol began to fly around the room, and the surprised mistress realized what was happening. The girls fainted, and the maids were worried about what was happening. Mikoto-sama ordered everyone to restore the space-time wall, otherwise this world would be doomed. Sometimes several people are transported to another world. In ancient Japan, this was called being spirited away. And it would be fine if they transported 1 or 2 people every couple of decades, but recently 100 people were transported through a summoning ritual. Each such transfer breaks the wall, and since many people were transported at once, and this happened many times, the Earth and this world are on the verge of collapse. Even the slightest change on Earth harms this world, and if Earth collapses, it will also affect their world. Yet she couldn't come up with any ideas to solve this problem. The maids complained that all the gods of the new world were rotten to the core, and if large-scale summonings continued, the wall separating space and time would not hold. To this, the goddess replied that if the gods of this world didn't get their act together, she would do something about it. She was informed that the number of summoned people this time was 108. To this, she replied that every time she tried to intervene, her power was always reflected, and that's why she still hadn't been able to do anything. In the mirror, she saw that one of the transported people had received the least from the summoning, and that his life had been very unhappy. She learned that his hobby was cooking, so she gave him cooking-related powers and then maximized his luck. She was confident that with this, he would be able to overcome all hardships. She wanted to give him something else, but she was interrupted and told that what she had already given was enough. She knew herself that if she gave him more, his body and mind wouldn't be able to handle it. In that case, she placed divine protection on him and said that she would only grant him more when his body and mind were ready. She also added that even if he remained sealed, this should significantly increase his strength. She looked in the mirror and was overjoyed, as she had waited so long for this hour. She urged him to come quickly and punish all those corrupt gods. She also added that she wouldn't spare her strength to help him and that they would experience punishment and sorrow for summoning so many people. She got carried away and stopped behaving appropriately, then told herself to be more careful. The team returned to the mansion. Prill brought water and a clean towel for Hannah, who was still unconscious in bed. Her sister was looking after her. In the next room, Kanan and Sumeragi, who were very worried about Sanya, were sleeping on the sofa. Our hero recalled old memories, like coming home to a note saying his family had gone shopping to celebrate his efforts on the entrance exams, and that his mom had prepared a feast. Seeing the note, he immediately went to the kitchen to check on the food, thinking his mom had probably messed up the seasonings again, and that he would fix everything before they returned. As he was fixing the food, the phone rang. He walked over and picked it up. What he heard on the phone shocked him so much that the ladle fell to the floor as he was informed about a car accident. It turned out that the truck driver had been distracted and crashed into the car. His parents and younger sister were in the car. This family had adopted their deceased friend's son and raised him as their own. He and Ayumi were like brother and sister. Everyone wondered what Tsukuru would do now. He woke up in tears from the memories with a worried Kanan beside him, who informed him that Sanya had woken up. She was very concerned and wanted to ask what happened, but he interrupted her, saying that everything was fine and she shouldn't worry. They entered the room where Hannah and Sanya were. The sister jumped up and immediately thanked him for saving her younger sister. She thanked the master and Kanan again and also said that she was indebted to him. He asked them to stop thanking him and said that the hot, easily digestible porridge in his hands was for her. He explained that it was food from his homeland and should be suitable for Sanya right now. To this, he again heard words of gratitude from both sisters. She took a spoon, tasted the hot porridge, and immediately exclaimed how delicious it was, then began to eat it. The little sister also added that the rice was very soft and tasty and that her older sister should definitely try it too. Kanan's appetite was also piqued, but the older sister said it was fine and that Sanya should eat first. The more he looked at her, the more he saw Ayumi in her. But he had seen her lifeless and cold body with his own eyes. She was completely cold and pale, he thought. Yet he still held on to hope that if summoning to another world was possible, could this also be possible? He asked if she needed anything else. He asked Sanya if she knew a country called Japan, to which she replied that she had never heard of it. He asked if she had lived in that country or if she had amnesia, or if she had been found here, perhaps she had some memories left. The older sister interrupted him, saying that they were biological sisters and had grown up together, born from the same mother's womb, even when their paths diverged and they ended up in different families like Ibis and Fusel. Tsukuru said he understood, but then wondered if she was just a stranger who happened to look so much like Ayumi. They were curious why he was asking such strange questions to which he didn't want to answer. He apologized for asking them and told them to eat the food before it got cold. He left the room and Kanan ran out after him, asking him to wait. As they went down the stairs, a still worried Kanan followed him, saying that he had been acting strangely ever since they rescued Sanya-san. She asked if she could know the reason, to which he answered affirmatively. And then he simply said that she bore a striking resemblance to someone he knew and that he had simply made a mistake. She was a little surprised, but the master immediately said that they should return to the forest quickly before nightfall, as Lord Rotten and the others were there. Following him, she said that she still hoped he would tell her the real reason for his behavior when he was ready. He agreed and continued walking. In the Great Boar Forest, the battle against the monsters continued. The commander furiously shouted at everyone, telling them not to be afraid and that if they tried to run, they might die. Archers defended the rear, healers treated the wounded, and warriors were at the forefront. They all shouted that they must continue fighting until defeat and stake their honor as knights of the Ibis family. Kanan and her master watched all of this from a tree. And then, with a thud, the monster fell dead and they had defeated it. As a result, everyone's level began to rise. Everyone rejoiced, shouting loudly next to the fallen giant. Everyone joyfully thanked Sumeragadono, exclaiming that their levels now exceeded 100, and it was their turn to teach others. They even boasted about killing the great bird, which was level 140, so they had nothing left to fear. While everyone excitedly shouted about throwing a party when they returned, some added that the great bird's meat was delicious and they wanted to try it. Rotten and his loyal friend watched, shaking their heads, both proud and amused. The former commander even felt a little sad. Everyone returned to the castle with their heads held high. Former Captain Rotten was the last to walk, but he didn't enter the Ibis family estate. Soldiers who noticed called out to him, to which he replied that his duty was done and his role was over. All the fighters had returned safe and sound, and they had all fulfilled their lord's command. His family had already put the lord's life in danger, and he no longer deserved to set foot on the Ibis family's territory. The former captain said that they were all strong enough now and his help was no longer needed. The hero laughed and said that not only the knights had grown stronger, but he had too. Someone from behind remarked that it was just as Sumeragadono had said. Everyone turned sharply. It turned out to be the Duke and his daughter. He said he was wary of allowing someone with such a high level to roam the streets. He also understood why Rotten didn't want to return, and therefore, he wanted Rotten to lead a new city guard unit, which greatly surprised him. He also mentioned that people had reported bears appearing in the city recently and asked if Rotten could help patrol the area and eliminate them. "We can't afford to lose our precious residents. What should we do?" the princess added. The warrior wanted to object, but the lord interrupted him. The lord said he knew what kind of man Rotten was, having cared for him since birth. He also mentioned it would be a shame for Cloud, who wanted to become a knight and had a promising future. His loyal friend shook him vigorously, then hit him from behind, telling Rotten not to dare refuse their lord's offer. Remembering his son, he made up his mind. He thanked his lord and declared that from that moment on he would be his sword until his dying day. At home, Cloud and his grandmother were overjoyed by the good news. Meanwhile, at the castle, Hannah and her little sister were happily eating the delicious food prepared by their master and learning various skills, like strong arm and swift-footed for the younger one and body reinforcement for the older. They kept exclaiming how delicious it was and that their master's food was the best in the world, though the older sister sometimes tried to calm her younger sister and asked her to behave normally. The hero noticed that even considering the healing effects of his food, she had recovered remarkably well after being freed. They replied that it was because they were wolves, and for survival they only needed a little water and food. Besides, Sanya hadn't sustained serious injuries. The younger sister said she hadn't expected to be kidnapped while she was sleeping, and if she had woken up, she would have hit them as many times as they hit her. The master told them not to worry about it, as he had all stolen everything from them, from furniture to wallpaper, and the incriminating letter sent to the king had probably already arrived. The sisters were shocked, as this meant the end for him. She guiltily asked if she should have woken her up when they were still there, but her little sister said no, that it was fine if One-chan and the others punished them instead, because now she could eat delicious food every day, so she was happy. She even said she was glad she endured the conditions in Fusel's house. The hero and his loyal maid were shocked that she wanted to go with them, as it would be safer to stay in the city. At this, she cried out in fright that it was unfair and that they wanted to abandon her there alone. Her sister asked her not to be selfish, but she started crying and begging the master to take her with him. Memories flooded him, and the wolf girl's face reminded him of his little sister from Japan, and he couldn't resist her. So the master immediately agreed, and Kanan was shocked by such a quick response. But the little one was happy and thanked her master. This led to others teasing him, asking if he was a lolicon, to which he swiftly replied that he was not. Next, he prepared equipment for them and asked what they liked, also requesting them to choose clothes using a catalog as a reference. Hana-san wanted to continue wearing her maid outfit, and Sanya-san wanted to wear light leather armor. He saw their status in the window, which showed that after enhancement, the older sister's level was 28 and the younger's was only 8. Someone approached them and asked if they were leaving already. Dengaru-sama and Astelia-sama came to say goodbye and said they would welcome their visit anytime they had free time. The princess also added that she would pray for him to remain in good health until their next meeting, and that as long as he had the Iba's dagger, he would be treated as part of their family. He agreed. The princess hugged her maids goodbye and told them they could return home whenever they wished. She added that she already considered them her beloved sisters. The girls were very happy and agreed. Everyone watching was also very pleased by this. All the acquaintances they met along the way also bid them farewell. And now ready, the four of them set off on their journey. When the master was asked where they were headed, he replied, to the Great Borfa Forest. They weren't particularly thrilled about that. Their master told them they first needed to train the sisters, as they were currently just a burden, to be honest. He also added that it was painful to leave a town full of beast ears and that he wanted to get his mind off them. The sisters then pointed to their own ears and tails, while Kanan tried to stretch her ears, wishing they were like a wolf's. Suddenly, a large shadow fell over them from the sky, and their gaze turned upwards to see a great bird soaring high above. It seemed to be flying somewhere with a clear purpose. This was strange because these birds usually don't fly near villages. They only inhabit the deep parts of the Borf Wolf Forest. It was only when they saw the bird's flight path that they realized they were heading towards the city of Allegria. Hannah was surprised to see the great bird. Kanan confirmed it, saying they usually live deep within the Great Borf Forest, and it was unclear why it was so close to a human settlement now. They noted that it was flying towards Allegria. The sisters grew worried and began to say they needed to hurry to the city because it was in danger. Just then, Kanan declared she would handle everything herself. Using wind magic, she quickly flew up, approaching the great birds. She used a spear of fire on the birds soaring in the sky, striking them directly. The great bird looked like a roasted chicken. As soon as she hit them with her magic, she started to celebrate, but before she could even shout that she did it, she realized she was falling and plummeted downwards with a shriek. Sumeragi caught her and she thanked her master. The sisters cheered for their master and Kanan, praising how cool they were when they were told to look behind them. At that moment, 2 boars appeared behind the sisters, and before they could even get scared, the boars were caught by ribbons. It was Bez who caught them, saying it was a close call. Bez turned out to be the master's undead servant, and he explained that this area was quite dangerous, having scouted the vicinity. He explained that a horde of monsters had teamed up and was heading their way. Kanan declared that they couldn't let them into the city or there would be casualties. She added that no matter how strong Goliath and the others were, it would be incredibly difficult, as even they had their limits. The hero stated that he wouldn't tolerate the people he trained dying at the hands of these monsters. He then ordered Kanan to prepare, but she didn't understand what for. The master said he didn't know why these monsters were heading specifically for the city, but they intended to intercept them right there. As the monster horde approached, he told the girls to hide behind him, and they did exactly that. Kanan announced that she would burn them all to ashes and unleashed her flame storm magic. The power of the magic was so immense that it incinerated everything for several kilometers, terrifying the sisters. Meanwhile, our hero was dealing with the remaining monsters using his sword. The sisters remarked that even though they had strength and could fight, they couldn't do anything like that. They wondered if they could become as powerful as their mentors if they trained hard enough. At that moment, their master shouted that they needed to fight too, and that it was time for their training. They readily agreed, looking very determined. The hero instructed Hana to kill a level 230 silver elephant. He then struck it with his sword at low power, explaining that he would weaken it so she could focus on delivering the final blow. He used wood magic and dark link, and once everything was ready, Hana charged towards the elephant. As she delivered her strike, she activated body reinforcement, strong arm, Herculean strength, and quick speed. She then landed the blow, piercing the elephant, which shocked her. The arm she used to strike was also severely injured. She was horrified, not only because she had lost her right arm, but also because her power had increased so dramatically. Notifications popped up indicating she had leveled up, and the other worried girls rushed to her aid. The sword commented that she had increased her strength too much, and her body simply couldn't handle it, as the human body is a fragile thing. The hero explained that this is what happens when you push too far, and using his perfect cooking skill, he offered her food and urged her to eat it. She was in immense pain and couldn't even stand up to eat anything. He told her that if she didn't eat the food now, she would likely die. The shocked younger sister took the food and put it in Hana's mouth, telling her to hurry and eat it, or at least just swallow it. Immediately, her arm began to regrow and returned to normal. The sisters were stunned by how quickly the arm reappeared and healed. Their master told her to finish everything that was left, and she began apologizing for everything, but he said it was his fault. Kanan approached with a gloomy expression and remarked that he was very kind to Hana, clearly displeased that her own training had been Spartan-like, and she had to heal without anyone's help. He responded that he helped Hana because she lacked healing abilities, and he had also helped Kanan when she was in trouble, which she didn't deny. He then stated that the monsters were still there and they needed to finish them off once and for all, offering her an onigiri. She happily went to eat her onigiri. The master offered some to the younger sisters as well, explaining that these onigiri could boost their stamina, and if they could, they should eat them too, which they did. The hero stated that the level 220 Silheria monster was for Sani's training and told her not to be reckless. She handled it perfectly. She was overjoyed that her level had increased, though her sister reminded her to take it more seriously, otherwise she might get hurt. The younger one said that her older sister had hurt her because she had carelessly sustained an injury. Kanan, who was observing, was surprised by their synchronicity, wondering if it was because they were sisters or because they were wolves. He thought that even though they acted in sync, Sani averted her eyes during battle, not to mention the sheer number of these monsters. He found it abnormal that the monsters weren't getting tired and kept appearing even though they had disrupted their movement, so he asked the undead to find out why. He hoped everything would be alright, but at that moment the younger sister slipped on blood on the ground and was falling as a fox monster attacked her. In a split second, flashbacks of burying Ayumi flashed before his eyes. He swiftly ran to her aid and stood between the monster and her. When she opened her eyes, her master was already in front of her, and her sister was beating up the monster that had attacked them. Kanan rushed over, asking if they were all right amidst the commotion. She was scared, thinking it was her blood and that it happened because she was careless. But he reassured her, saying it was just a scratch and he would quickly heal the wound, and the main thing was that she wasn't seriously hurt. More monsters were approaching, and he told them to keep their fighting spirit up and finish them off. During lunch, he made curry, and the girls were very happy about it. He said he still had plenty of ingredients and that they should eat as much as they wanted. Hana mentioned that she had also prepared side dishes and desserts. Kanan had significantly more food than the others, but she was so happy about it and said that this was just her size. The younger sister was thrilled and wanted the same, but her sister didn't allow it, saying she wouldn't be able to eat that much. During dinner, they all chatted happily about food and other things. In the evening, the master cast a concealment spell on their tent and the surrounding area. The sword asked what was bothering him. The sword said he had been acting strangely ever since he met the younger sister, risking his life for her, which was completely unlike him. He told it not to talk nonsense, but the sword didn't listen and added that it was connected to him and could tell his mind was screaming in torment, asking if he had fallen in love with the girl. The master became very angry at this. He started yelling at it, saying that wasn't true and he didn't look at her that way. The sword said it was just a joke, that it only wanted to break the ice and he shouldn't worry so much or he'd wake the girls. Suddenly, he felt something was wrong and rushed out of the tent. The girls also woke up, not understanding what had happened. Bez hurried to his master. In the sky, he saw his undead servant and an elf. She was surprised that it was a human tribe and asked if they were the ones who destroyed the forest. She asked again if they were the ones who destroyed the forest. Bez urged him to run. He also wanted to say something about her, but before he could finish, he began to disappear. Sumeragi realized that Bez was safe. He had simply gone into the shadows because the sword could still sense him. The elf said that this was the great forest, the home of the elves, and that they could have killed monsters elsewhere without destroying their home. Therefore, she said they would pay for it with their lives, and she attacked him. He managed to parry the blow. He asked why she was attacking him, to which she was surprised at how he had blocked her attack. She wondered if it was a defense and if he was actually human, to which he told her not to ignore him. But he was also worried about his maids, thinking they would die from such attacks. He needed to get them away from here. For destroying the forest, they must be punished for their actions. Now he attacked and asked if she knew what she was talking about, as it was the monsters who attacked them and they had no choice but to fight them. It was self-defense. She called them foolish and said she would make sure they died quickly and painlessly. Because she could fly, she was difficult to approach and her wind magic blocked all his magical attacks. The sword reminded him that he could use his ability. The hero was annoyed at being reminded of something he already knew. He then checked her detailed appraisal. Her name was Anthea. She was an ancient elf of level 415, a guardian elf who loved challenges. He asked the sword what made ancient elves different from regular ones, and the sword explained that ancient elves were the founders of the elf race, and she was one of them. Now it was clear why Bez couldn't defeat her, as she was incredibly strong. She was displeased that he had appraised her abilities, and he was shocked that she knew about it. Her level was 100 higher than his, and he didn't even know what kind of reincarnation skill she possessed, making it impossible to figure out how to attack her. She was annoyed that he was ignoring her questions and simply told him to die, unleashing a hurricane upon him. 3 massive whirlwinds engulfed the master. The worried girls couldn't help him. The youngest one was about to run after him when she was stopped and told that they were much weaker than this elf and would only get in his way. All they could do was believe in him and wait. He attacked again. The sword told him to take a closer look at his opponent, to which he replied that it was unnecessary advice, and he crashed to the ground. He had already faced various trials since coming to this world, and the sword didn't need to ask how he was feeling. He had to do something, anything. He yelled at her that he wouldn't die until he destroyed her, and he simultaneously used earth magic and dark magic. She was surprised that he was still resisting. He attacked once more, and she emotionlessly stated that it was futile, then cut off his arm. As soon as she did that, even more copies of him appeared from all directions. He tried to stop her with illusions. She remarked on his cleverness, but then said she could defeat all of them at once. She could certainly defeat them all if she killed them simultaneously. But before she could, he pierced her with his sword and declared that this was the end. He went down to look at her, but his instincts stopped him from getting too close, and he was right to be cautious. She looked at him and asked if he wasn't going to finish her off. He said he had already inflicted a fatal wound and assumed it was due to her reincarnation skill. She said she hadn't expected to lose to a human and that he was right. Her reincarnation skill was why she was still alive. But if he tried to kill her again, she would die. He asked why she was telling him this, as the weak should always perish in the end. He felt like she was holding something back, because if it were truly that simple, he would have killed her with a single blow. She laughed loudly, startling the sword, which wondered if something was wrong with her. She then said it seemed she had stepped on a lion's tail. Her name was Anthea, and she belonged to the ancient elven lineage. She asked his name, and he replied, Tsukuru Sumeragi. She then said she surrendered, and he could do whatever he pleased with her. They returned to the tent, where the maids were shouting, demanding to know how she could hold their master hostage. She laughed and commented on the lovely ladies approaching them. Our hero tried to stop them, but they continued to fight, declaring they would battle for him until the very end. She asked them what they would do to her if they would hunt her like monsters in the great forest. The girls replied that they didn't understand what she was talking about. Sumeragi said she still hadn't listened to what he was saying, to which she responded that she wanted to hear what he would say next. At the master's command, Bez explored the great forest. The master asked if he had found out who was controlling those monsters, to which the surprised fairy asked if they hadn't created them. He replied no, stating that if they had, they wouldn't have protected the village and risked their lives trying to eradicate them. The undead reported that there were no traces in the forest of anyone who could control them, but for a moment he had felt the presence of a demon. The fairy then said that demons could easily possess the minds of any creature and asked what kind of demon it was. He angrily said he had tried to explain this earlier, but out of nowhere an ancient elf appeared and interrupted him. And what was the fairy supposed to do after seeing a ghost? She didn't think he could serve a human. In any case, they were no longer enemies, and he suggested they calm down and talk peacefully. She agreed. She apologized for attacking them and welcomed them to the elf village. Everyone admired the beauty of the forest and their village, but suddenly they were startled to see a man lying on the ground, greeting the queen while prostrate. She ordered him to find out how the villagers were feeling, and the servant immediately stood up, bowed to her, and ran off. Everyone was surprised that she was indeed a queen, when suddenly small, cute elf girls ran up and asked if she had already defeated those monsters. The queen told them not to worry, the monsters would no longer come to their village, and they could be sure of that. Sumeragi asked when an outsider had last set foot in elf territory and if it had been a long time ago. She replied that elves never interfere in the outside world's affairs, preferring to live in peace and quiet and not associate with other races. In other words, hermits, he thought, yet a demon decided to attack them from the outside. Because of this, not only they suffered, but also human and beastkin tribes. Although perhaps it was a mistake and not the entire demon race attacked, but one specific demon. She said it couldn't be a mistake because that demon attacked them specifically, not other races. They didn't understand what she was talking about, and she began to explain that it was a very long story, one that needed to start from the time of the Battle of the Gods. 1,000 years ago, a battle occurred between the main species, an alliance of giant and demon tribes against dwarves, humans, beastkin, and elves. This conflict would later be known as the Battle of the Gods. 100 years later, the alliance managed to win, but one of the 3 continents was destroyed. This caused serious damage to the remaining tribes. Giants and demons were banished to the east, to a desert continent. After that battle, the alliance of the 4 races guarded their territories and declared war on the other 2, who began searching for rich lands to conquer. 4 of the 6 coalitions agreed not to interfere in each other's affairs and to coexist peacefully. But over the past few hundred years, suspicious movements have been noticed from the human race. No one knew what the humans were planning, whether they wanted to increase their magical power or population. But if they were planning a war between the 4 alliances, bloodshed on this continent would be unavoidable. Then the other 2 alliances would seize the opportunity to expand their borders and join the battle as well. Most likely, the demons hadn't learned about this yet and decided to seize the elves' territory before engaging in battle with the others. If her suspicions were correct, then all 4 alliances would have to unite to confront the demons, and they must not allow a new war, similar to the one in the past. Sumeragi sat by the pond, pondering what the princess had told him. He said it was none of his business when she approached him. She called her master, it was Kanan. Apparently she saw something in the river, to which he said there was nothing there. She said she never thought she would visit an elf village, let alone hear a story told by Anthea. He asked if she wanted to return to her village, to which she replied no, because he wanted to help the princess, although he himself didn't know what to do yet. She said she knew he came from another world. In captivity, she had heard a story about a hero being summoned to protect them from the Demon King, and the summoned hero's name was very similar to his. This meant he was the master summoned from another world. He admitted that he was indeed summoned from another world, but he was no hero at all. When he arrived in this world, he was simply lost and didn't know who he was, where he was, or how to fight monsters. He was abandoned and left alone in the great forest, not knowing where to go. The maid didn't understand how he could be abandoned. It was inhumane. He agreed, but added, is that how a hero should behave? It was hard for him. He didn't know how to use magic, couldn't properly hold a sword, was afraid of monsters, and couldn't defend himself. He was attacked by beasts many times and almost died of hunger. But each time he overcame his fear, fought, and tried to survive. He wasn't going to save this world. He just wanted revenge on those who made him go through all of this. But in the end, he saved Kanan and Sanya. He also saved the city and people of Algeria, and they were all very grateful to him. She said that to her, he was the bravest person, and she was very sorry that he had to go through all of that alone, and that she would never forgive herself for not being able to be there. Sanya jumped up behind her and also started apologizing. As it turned out, both the sisters and the princess had all heard the story and apologized. Hannah said that if it was true, she was very sorry too. The princess joined in and asked if she could also apologize, as she saw how much he was loved and would wait her turn. And joking aside, since he managed to survive in the great forest, it meant he wasn't summoned to this world for nothing. He was truly capable of helping them confront the Demon King, and she was ready to follow him. Everyone was shocked by the princess's words, but she added that her knowledge and strength wouldn't be superfluous, which made sense. And according to her, the master already had a whole harem. He was displeased by this and asked her not to say such embarrassing things. The princess, gazing thoughtfully into the distance, wondered if summoning a hero would make defeating their enemies much easier now. She wondered if that was truly the case. But no one yet knew that a great danger in the form of a giant was approaching them. The closest servant, it turned out, was looking for them to call them to the table. Dinner was ready. The girls were delighted with the dishes prepared by the elves, and the servant invited them to eat heartily. Before them lay a large baked caterpillar. The servant explained that they had specifically hunted it so the guests could try it and had carefully baked it to create a crispy crust. However, the girls' faces showed that such a delicacy was not to their liking. The children asked if the princess would join them because then she would also need to eat. The princess decided to travel a bit and get to know the human race better. She added that human life was too short and so she would return in less than 100 years. They wouldn't even notice her absence, and she asked them to take care of everyone while she was gone. The sword commented that she was leaving for 100 years but spoke as if she was just going for a stroll. Sukuru mentally replied to him that he was a sword with no lifespan. The girls refused to eat the insects, claiming they weren't hungry enough for bugs. He, however, thought about how he'd eaten worse things while wandering the forest and that he didn't really have a choice. He thanked the elves for their efforts and said that in return he let them prepare one monster as well. The elves were displeased and declared they wouldn't allow it. So he asked them not to worry so much and suggested they consider it a farewell gift from a chef. He pulled a large spider from storage and everyone was scared, whispering that the spider had a tough body and wasn't easy to defeat. But he added that he knew how to handle it. He decided to do them a favor and cut the spider into serving pieces. The elves were shocked at how easily he sliced through the iron crab like paper and how sharp his sword was. Then he started cooking. Using his cooking magic, he created a variety of dishes: battered spider, spider in tomato sauce, and several other options. He invited everyone to sit down at the table. The elves were amazed by the taste. The meat was sweet and juicy, and the sauce was perfect. Even the sashimi tasted wonderful. The dishes were magnificent. They hadn't expected the same meat could be prepared in so many different and delicious ways. The maids also ate well, and the princess admitted he was a born chef. He noted that the elves' food looked quite tasty too, to which the princess replied that their cuisine couldn't compare to his cooking. He thought the chef might have overcooked the meat, making it tough, and it would have been better cooked medium rare. Hannah then approached him. She announced that their training was officially complete and they had successfully passed. Now the question was where they would go after leaving the elf village. Conan suggested heading to the country of summoned heroes. Sanya added that it was the Crud Empire, home to the human race, and Hannah noted it was far to the south. The princess asked if there was a route or a way to get there. There's no direct path from this continent to the Crud Empire. You can't get there straight from the Beastmen Kingdom. They would have to make a detour through the Homan Empire or travel by sea. Everyone then turned to him, asking if it was safe to go south. He asked them to wait, but it quickly became clear that he didn't know the geography of this world, even though he'd spent quite a long time in the Great Forest. The sword added that without him, he'd still be wandering there. Then he was told to shut up. The princess realized there was no choice and decided to show them a map of the continent. The continent was divided. To the north was the Wolf Forest, inhabited by elves. To the south were the lands of the human race, and in the center were 3 countries populated by beastmen and dwarves. The princess pointed to the elf village in the northern forest on the map. Algeria is in the Templeton Kingdom, one of the central beastmen countries. The Raid Crud Empire is the largest city in the south, inhabited by humans. He asked how they could get there. Going through the Templeton Kingdom was the best option without crossing the border into the Luxgale Kingdom. He remembered his friend saying she would be in Luxgale. The Templeton Kingdom is a country where beastmen and humans coexist, and it maintains diplomatic relations with neighboring nations, so crossing it would be easier. Although he might be wrong, as he knew almost nothing about humans. But they told him there would be no problems as they had passed through this kingdom several times before. It seemed the route was chosen. But at that moment, the princess and the hero felt a threat, and a servant rushed into the room, shouting, "Trouble." He reported that something resembling a meteor had appeared in the sky. Everyone hurried to look. They noticed the object was flying directly towards them. Everyone started discussing what to do. Conan said she would try to stop it with magic. The princess decided to help, and they used flame and wind magic together. With their combined efforts, they created a huge fireball and directed it straight at the flying object, hoping to destroy it. The ball hit its target and caused an explosion. Everyone rejoiced, thinking it was destroyed as it had fallen to the ground. Suddenly, another explosion followed, and the hero managed to put up a barrier. A huge mountain appeared before their eyes. He said that if this object had fallen without their intervention, the entire village would have been destroyed. The princess noted there was nothing to celebrate. The forest had been harmed, and she swore to destroy whoever was responsible. Just then, a giant appeared before them. The princess recognized him. It was Kraft, one of the ancient giants. The princess declared that he was unforgivable for destroying the forest. She addressed Kraft, the chief of the giant tribe, who was watching them with a smirk. The giant laughed, telling the princess how long it had been since they last met, and even after all these years, she was still so small. He was an ancient giant, level 495, with the title Ancient Giant, ever seeking challenges. The princess asked if he had come to lose again, just like last time. The hero thought that the giant's level was higher than Antia's, and his skills were focused on physical strength, so if a fight started here, the village would suffer. The giant sneered, noting that she was once again afraid to fight alone and, as always, brought an army with her. The princess demanded an explanation, why he had come, destroyed the forest, and endangered her people. She asked if his subordinate was responsible for the monster incident. The giant irritably said he didn't know what she was talking about. The princess again demanded answers, and he remarked that she had lost one of her lives and was weakened, which was why he had come. He declared that she only had one life left, and this would be their final encounter. At that very moment, the hero sliced his arm and fingers. The hammer fell from his hand, and the giant asked who this insolent person was. The hero replied that he was a human, the one who had taken Antia's life. The giant, addressing the princess, asked if he could have a little fun with him. Sumeragi stated that he hated those who tried to destroy the weak without any explanation. The giant asked again if he was the one who had taken Antia's last life. The giant didn't believe him, and the hero asked if he wanted to measure his strength or if he was saying that because he was afraid and couldn't admit his cowardice. But if the giant admitted defeat and repented for destroying the forest, he would forgive him. This greatly angered the giant. The giant said that it seemed like he wanted to die. He summoned a hammer to his other hand, shouting its name, Mjolnir, and they began to fight fiercely, moving further away from the village. The maids noted that this was their master's plan. They were ordered to send all children and those who couldn't fight to the village, as monsters might come, and those who could fight were to defend the village. The sword said they were far enough and the fight could begin. The giant asked why the hero wasn't attacking him, only defending against his blows. The hero smirked and replied that his attacks never reached their target. The sword smirked and said that it seemed this giant had traded his intelligence for strength. Now his master would show him what they were capable of. As soon as they struck, they were surprised, as it was only a scratch on the giant's leg, and he himself laughed, saying it tickled. To the giant, these small blades were nothing. They couldn't even scratch him. The hero began to attack chaotically, and the giant barely managed to react. The giant said that even changing tactics wouldn't help, but the hero didn't stop. Sumeragi knew this and was preparing to deliver a fatal blow. This greatly pleased the giant, as he thought the hero had finally decided to fight him for real. The hero used the magical attack Hellfire Guillotine, and the giant unleashed his powerful attack. The shockwave was so strong that the ground trembled, the entire forest shook, and the elves were in shock, not understanding what was happening. The giant was thrilled because he was the first to withstand his powerful attack. He wasn't even harmed by the Hellfire Guillotine. Moreover, his appearance changed, and the sword was shocked. The giant boasted that he was an ancient giant, the only one who commanded giants and demons, and asked for his name. The hero replied that he was human, Sumeragi Tsukuru. The giant inquired about the nature of his strength, saying it was unlikely to be Themas, as humanity had long become helpless. The sword thought that was the name of an ancient human race, but the hero said he had no idea what he was talking about and that he was just an ordinary human. The giant laughed, smirking that the hero had no idea what he was talking about. However, it no longer mattered because he was sure he would soon kill the hero. He said he would show him his true strength and punch the air. The hero was shocked that he had created a shockwave with just his fist, which sent him flying a great distance. Half dead, he pulled meat from his storage to recover. The sword told him not to relax, but its master silenced it again. The giant was surprised that the hero could still stand, but said his death was inevitable. The hero, in a defiant tone, replied that he had just given him a small head start. The giant laughed, scoffing at the boy's words. He might be good at cracking jokes, but he wouldn't be leaving here alive, and then attacked. The giant yelled at the hero, wondering why he was only defending and not attacking. The giant attacked just as before, but his strength and speed had increased many times over, making it harder for the hero. He asked where his self-confidence had gone. Sumeragi fought off the attacks with all his might, expending all his energy. The sword admitted that it wouldn't lie. For his current self, this would be a tough fight. It was difficult for him to fight the giant, but the sword supported him. And although the giant's level and strength were higher than the hero's, Sumeragi was lucky. He had a mythical-class divine sword on his side. The sword asked him to believe in it, deflect attacks, and follow its instructions, and it would, in turn, find the right moment. For now, he should confuse the enemy using camouflage and dark magic. The sword also told him to increase his speed, move faster, suggesting where to deflect attacks from above, left, right, and below. It insisted that the hero not relax and move faster than he could think, to get his blood flowing throughout his body and push him to his absolute limit. The giant also noticed that Sumeraga's movements had changed, that he had sped up. And then the right moment arrived. The sword told him to use it and strike the enemy's face. The giant retorted that he shouldn't even think he could hurt him with that dull sword. To this, the hero shouted not to underestimate him. After all, he was Black Dew. Sumeragi used his Hado magic. Crafton didn't understand what was happening. The hero then uttered the next magical technique, Supreme Technique number 2. He struck with his sword. It was the skill True Fang Meteor Slicer. The giant roared, shouting that he wouldn't allow him to do it, and swung his fist. But the man's sword strike landed on the giant's right arm. Then the giant swung his second arm to deliver another blow. The sword noticed this and said that things were bad and he needed to defend himself immediately. The hero was sent flying a great distance by such a powerful blow, but the giant also fell to the ground. The sword noted that their hasty preparation wasn't enough and told its master to heal immediately. However, he didn't respond for some reason. The sword still couldn't wake its master. Sumeragi was barely conscious, thinking he needed to quickly prepare and eat recovery food. But he couldn't even move and just listened to the giant's speech about how he had been pushed to such an extent for the first time, losing an arm and even falling, calling it a good fight. He was about to crush Tsukuru Sumeragi with his foot. But Kanan wouldn't let him do it. She declared that she wouldn't let him kill her master. Sumeragi saw her but couldn't move or say anything. He didn't understand what she was thinking because she couldn't stop the giant. She would just die with him. And just as he reached his limit, a goddess appeared and asked if he wanted to become stronger. He was curious who she was, but the goddess replied that he was not in a position to ask questions. If he didn't hurry with his answer, he would die here with his maid. She repeated the question, asking if he wanted to become stronger. He was deep in thought, wondering if it wasn't obvious. He couldn't die here. He hadn't accomplished anything yet. There were those he had to destroy, and he had to become the strongest. The goddess replied that it was a good answer. Now she could release the divine protection. He still wanted to know who she was, but the goddess said he would find out soon enough. A notification appeared. The seal of divine protection has been removed. As soon as the first notification appeared, a second one immediately followed, that he had learned a unique skill, Feast of the Gods. A bright light illuminated his body. Kanan and the giant were astonished by this divine radiance, not understanding what was happening. Notifications about new skills appeared on the screen. He could now create dishes from ingredients above level 300. There was also a warning. One of the effects could only be used twice, after which he would lose 1 sense for 23 hours and 55 minutes. He mumbled that he hadn't seen such descriptions in a long time, thanking for the overpowered skill, though he still didn't know whom to thank. He used Feast of the Gods on Imperial Dragon meat, wanting to gain strength to defeat Crafton. The taste wasn't great, but the effect of his Feast of the Gods skill granted him a new skill, Divine Power. The hero went on the offensive, but Crafton still wanted to know what he had done. Crafton yelled that the ancient giant couldn't be defeated by just a small power-up. But the man had grown stronger and was now hard to catch, landing blows all over the giant's body. Crafton couldn't understand what had happened to his strength. The man had become so fast that he couldn't even see him. Could he really be just a simple human, Crafton wondered, but he refused to admit it, unwilling to lose. Then Sumeragi delivered the final blow with his hellfire magic, Guillotine. Crafton was horrified by the pain and couldn't believe what was happening. He then fell dead and a rain of the giant's blood poured everywhere. Sumeragi stood before him, covered in blood. Kanan was also covered in blood but still worried about her master. She called out to him. However, his anger hadn't subsided yet, so she needed to be cautious. Before he could curse, the youngest one ran up and hugged him, exclaiming how cool he was. He was surprised to see Sanya and the others. They told him he did great and that they expected nothing less from him. Kanan blamed herself heavily for not being able to do anything. Auntie A said that if the hero had died here, her own death would have been in vain. She also reminded him that this wasn't the end and that she hoped he hadn't forgotten. Before she could finish, a huge shadow appeared. This shadow belonged to Crafton. He had already regenerated. Everyone was in disarray, and the hero once again drew his sword. The sword urged him to finish Crafton off before his divine power dissipated. But the recently revived giant roared, Mjolnir, and his hammer instantly flew into his hands. The hero was just about to strike when the giant declared that he wouldn't allow it this time and used magic. He shouted, "Blow away," after which a glowing magic circle appeared. Sumeragi thought that this light was very similar to the one from when he was summoned to this world. And then there was nothing left but desolate mountains. No one understood what was happening. Sanya started to panic, asking if they were in a desert. Either they had destroyed everything or died, and her sister couldn't calm her down. The princess said that they were alive and that the hammer's power had teleported them somewhere. She could no longer sense Crafton or the elves, as if they were in another world. Kanan became worried and asked her master if they were in Japan. After finishing cleaning his clothes, he replied that they were not. He began to explain that the world he lived in was much more, but before he could finish, he collapsed. Everyone rushed to him, concerned. He himself didn't understand what had happened to him. Sumeragi couldn't feel his body. In the kingdom of Luke Sundale, in the capital of Sunset, a homeless man approached the hero lady, begging for help for his daughter who had been poisoned by a monster. He pleaded for her to heal the girl or provide an antidote. The heroine wanted to help, but the guards forbade it. The guards explained that the man was likely a beast human with low social responsibility. He might try to attack, steal property, or if not, he would harass her, extorting food or money. They told her that she might not know this, being from another world, but people here would do anything, pretend to be sick, or even mutilate themselves just to beg for a coin. Perhaps this man himself had kidnapped the child and poisoned her. They advised her to ignore such people. Suzunen still wanted to help, as the girl was indeed in a critical condition. But the guard said that even if she were healed, she would still perish because she would be used by others. He asked her to leave them and attend to her own affairs. Nearby, her friend called her by name. But she burst into tears, not knowing whom to believe. In this world, human life was worth nothing. People here died easily and senselessly, unlike in Japan. Here, no one cared about human lives, so children from other worlds were pulled in and used as weapons without hesitation. People quickly got rid of those who were not useful. Even passers-by discussed how many slaves they had bought and what they were like. Mickey said that she was disgusted not only by this world but also by their classmates, who were becoming just like it. She explained that they were destined to fight a war as heroes in a world where slavery and discrimination were commonplace. Why did things turn out this way? If she had known, she wouldn't have let Tsukuru go alone. He might already be someone's slave or a beggar. In the worst-case scenario, her friend interrupted her, telling her not to talk like that. She said they had to endure this, become stronger, defeat the demon lord, and return home. She believed they would still meet Tsukuru-kun on their journey. She thanked Mickey and said she believed in her and in Tsukuru-kun. Meanwhile, he was still unconscious. Everyone was worried. They wondered if he had lost consciousness due to the damage he took or hitting his head, even though Kanan had already used healing magic on him. But he felt his brain, eyes, and ears working, yet he couldn't feel his body, as if he were under anesthesia. The sword suggested that this might be a penalty for using the Feast of the Gods. It called out the name of the sword, Black Mist, as it had stirred. The sword telepathically asked Sumeragi if he wasn't glad that at least it could communicate with him. Suddenly, the sword flew into the sky and glowed, announcing that it was the divine sword Black Mist, and that they could communicate telepathically with its master, and it would act as a guide. It continuously recounted stories about the hero, and Sanya listened with interest. It even told how the hero once forgot he was naked and earned the strange title of peculiar person. Tsukuru told it to shut up, saying it wasn't even with him then, and to stop telling questionable stories. But the sword proudly claimed it was doing him a favor by telling all the shameful stories he wouldn't have told. The hero thought he would definitely get back at it once he could move. Auntie A and Hannah returned. They had surveyed the area, but it was unfamiliar to them. This wasn't the continent of death where giants and demons lived, because here they found many demons but no other tribes. His sister was covered in demon blood but assured her worried younger sister that she wasn't hurt. Sumeragi remembered Crafton saying that he controlled both giants and demons. The sword recounted a story its master knew. The princess confirmed that since the War of the Gods, even when demons and giants were defeated and banished to the continent of death, an ancient type of demon had never appeared. Perhaps the ancient demon is dead, they asked her. But the answer was that it was impossible. When an ancient type of demon dies, a new one is born. He concluded that to control the powers of other tribes, it must be either through cooperation or by sealing the demon so it cannot interfere. The girls were shocked, realizing they too could end up in such a prison, inhabited only by demons. These were just Tsukuru's guesses, which could be confirmed if he could summon the undead. But due to the loss of his sense of touch, his skills weren't working. They decided to set up camp and wait for him to recover. Kanan said she would set up the tent. Auntie Asan and Sanya-san asked her to help them set up the tents and Hana-san to prepare dinner. But first she wanted to use her purification skill on them. She was acting a little strange, which the princess noticed and asked her what she was thinking about. She was flustered and couldn't answer clearly, but Hana said it was normal to be anxious in such a situation, as everyone felt the same way. Then she went to prepare dinner, believing that a warm meal would bring peace of mind. Everyone thanked her. Everyone went to sleep except Kanan, who was looking after her master, even though the sword had already said he wasn't sick and didn't need it. She apologized for not knowing he was awake, as she was very worried. She blamed herself, thinking that if she had had the strength to at least distract Crafton, this wouldn't have happened to him. Although he hadn't even expected that from her. The sword asked if it should tell her his thoughts, but the hero refused. Even when the truth was revealed, no one could bring the dead back to life, and such a wound takes a long time to heal. And now, finally, he could move again. Everything was fine. Having regained his sense of touch and his skills, he immediately summoned the dead spirit, Bez. The girls, along with Bez, went to scout. The hero, however, wondered why the skill required more magical power than usual this time. On the other hand, he had leveled up from fighting Auntie A and Crafton. Now, there shouldn't be any anomalies in his status, and he didn't have any useless skills since he'd traded them in an even exchange. The high magic power consumption was most likely due to this place, and he was still wondering who that woman was. A demon snuck up behind the hero, but the princess immediately killed it. She explained that demons are aggressive creatures. They attacked all night, and even when captured, they claimed to be scouts. Despite this, she killed them. The hero thought she was extremely cruel to her enemies. However, the more demon corpses there were here, the more familiars Bez could summon, which would be a nightmare for the demons. The undead returned and reported seeing the edge of this world while destroying demons along the way. The girls said he was very strong and didn't let them do anything. Sumeragi asked what the edge of this world meant. Bez confirmed that it was exactly as Auntie A had guessed. This wasn't their world. The hero thought it wasn't his either. If he defeated an enemy above level 300 and used them as ingredients for the Feast of the Gods, they could return. Bez announced that he had found the ancient demon's location. Meanwhile, the demon couldn't understand why the other demons weren't returning, or why even their corpses couldn't be found. Hundreds of years had passed since Crafton sealed him in this world with his strange hammer. He was already living in torment, and now it had only increased. The ancient demon ordered Gazan to eliminate the intruders immediately. A team of 5 people and 1 ghost arrived at the fortress, which was an ancient demon's castle. As they rapidly approached, they were met by Gazelle the vampire. A window displaying his stats appeared next to the evil creature. The vampire introduced himself as a great demon, declaring that anyone who disturbed his land would be annihilated. He didn't even finish his speech before a fist slammed into him. Hannah, the maid, punched him in the face. At that moment, the vampire's minions were outraged, questioning how she dared to treat their lord in such a way. They began to attack her, but Sanya rushed to Hannah's aid with her axe-wielding technique. She noted that there were too many demons. Biz, the spirit, observed that they had clearly come because they sensed an anomaly. The spirit added that they had most likely reached the ancient demon. The heroes cleared their path. Sumeragi turned to the elf, who was deep in thought. She replied that she was thinking about Mjolnir, the axe in Crafton's hands. She was certain he hadn't created it himself. The swordsman asked her if it was possible someone else had given it to him. The warrior received a positive answer. The elf explained that her people couldn't create such a weapon. Hannah confirmed this theory, clarifying that beast folk and dwarves didn't possess such immense magical powers. Biz suggested that perhaps the cunning death spirits, known for their trickery and immense magical power, had a hand in creating the axe. However, they don't get along with other races and are especially hostile towards giants. Theoretically, the weapon could also have been stolen from demons by a giant, but humans can also create similar weapons. Sumeragi wondered if the demons might have an answer to this question. The elf immediately warned the swordsman not to expect too much, as demons are on par with giants and not particularly intellectual. But the young man replied that if that were the case, he would simply turn the demon into ingredients. The swordsman speculated that if he used the Feast of the Gods, they could all escape, but he needed an ingredient above level 300, and the local demon fit that description. Meanwhile, someone was lamenting that thousands of his soldiers had vanished in an instant. He growled angrily, sensing someone's presence and their anti-magic. Kana and Biz successfully attacked their opponents with magic, which greatly surprised the demon. The swordsman kicked open the door and the team burst into the hall, striking fear into the demon's followers. They tried to stop the warrior. The elf sarcastically remarked that the subordinates weren't listening to their master. Catapulpas, the ancient demon, sat on his throne. An information window with his stats appeared next to him. The demon merely chuckled. Catapulpas began to speak, saying that they too had apparently been struck by Crafton's strange hammer, that this world was self-sufficient and there was no way out. He considered them fools for coming to fight. The swordsman noted that the demon himself knew nothing about the weapon. The elf responded to the demon's earlier words, stating that they were the ones who attacked the team first, and it remained to be seen who was more foolish. These words provoked the demon, and he roared that elves couldn't fight without borrowing the strength of others. He questioned their condescension. The demon rose from his seat, threatening them not to underestimate him. Sanya lunged at him, declaring that she would be the first to chop him down. At that moment, Catapulpas activated the cursed Eye 3 on his stomach. Sanya fell under its effect. The girl seemed to drop dead, lying with her eyes open. Hannah cried out her sister's name, rushing to drag her away. Someone shouted that they shouldn't look into the demon's eyes. Catapulpas continued to chuckle. The demon replied that it was pointless not to look. At the same time, eyeballs began to pour out of his body, surrounding the team. In addition to the cursed eyes, the demon also activated poisonous eyes, assuring them that the invaders wouldn't be able to avert their gaze. Catapulpas watched the unfolding events with delight. The elf commanded everyone to close their eyes. Hannah hugged her sister, who was under the curse's influence. The demon continued to insist that it was all useless, claiming that anyone who fell under the gaze of his eyes would become his puppet. Sanya then swung her axe at her sister. The swordsman intercepted Sanya and, with a single lunge, appeared above the demon, catching him off guard. The warrior sliced through the throne with his katana. The demon was surprised that his attacker was just a human. The swordsman explained that he could pinpoint the demon's location even with his eyes closed, revealing his trump card, a presence detection technique. A frightened and wounded Catapulpas shrieked that it wasn't over and that he had a second life. To this, the swordsman replied that he had no second life and pierced him with his blade. Among all the ancient demons the swordsman had fought, this one was the weakest. While Hannah rejoiced at Sanya's return to normal, the swordsman was butchering the demon's carcass. He told the elf that he had searched everything but found no useful information. However, they did have Catapulpas's meat and they needed to gather their strength to return. The elf merely looked at the piece of flesh with disgust and asked if the swordsman really intended to eat it. In truth, Sumeragi wasn't thrilled about the idea either. Their conversation was then interrupted. Kana made a request to the swordsman. She asked to be allowed to taste the food of the gods. When Kana asked to be allowed to partake in the food of the gods, everyone turned to look at her. Kana recalled the past. In the tent, while Sumeragi slept, she sat beside him, thinking about Lord Dolce and her own inadequacy as she was still being protected. At some point, Hannah arrived with an invitation to take a walk. Kana expected to be scolded, but instead, Hannah offered her a vial of sweets. Hannah asked her to keep this gesture a secret from Sanya. Kana remembered the lady who had also asked her to keep a secret from Lord Dolce. Hannah explained that these were the candies Alterias had requested from the maid of the Abu's family. He also added that it was a way to cheer Kana up. Understanding the sentiment, Kana apologized for making them worry about her. She had been a mage's apprentice for quite some time. The girl thought she would become stronger, but nothing had worked out so far. She also praised Hana, who, in her opinion, was always composed, looked good, and could do anything. But Hana countered that, unlike her, Kana was not a sinner. Kana tried to encourage the wolf girl, explaining that she had to act that way because her sister's safety was threatened. Hana replied that everyone had forgiven her, and she wanted to repay them by dedicating herself entirely to serving her master. The wolf girl added that her abilities couldn't compare to her master's, but she could save him time. Hana noted that this also applied to Kana. The wolf girl had only survived because the sorceress had intervened on her behalf. She asked Kana not to forget that there were people who were saved only because of who Kana herself was. Hana quickly apologized for potentially saying too much, but Kana thanked the maid. The wolf girl's words had made her feel better. Kana added that Hana was right and she would continue to do everything in her power. Back in the present, everyone was still looking at Kana. Sumeragi asked the sorceress what she had just said. She repeated her request for the food of the gods. The elf mumbled with some concern that she needed to take care of herself. The swordsman, however, responded to her request by saying that even if she was a glutton, there had to be a limit. This made the sorceress indignant, as it was a misunderstanding. Kana explained her request. The swordsman uses the power gained from consuming the food of the gods to return to his world. As for spatial temporal magic itself, it's every mage's dream, and Kana wanted to practice using it. The warrior reminded her of the 5-minute time limit and the risk of losing one of her senses. The girl replied that she knew about it. Even with only 5 minutes, she would have enough time to experience and analyze it, which would ultimately allow her to master this type of magic. Kana also added that after the swordsman completed his revenge, she could send him, or even go with him, to his world. The girl sounded convincing, and the swordsman considered her proposal. Sumeragi had no attachment to his world as he had nothing there. He eventually agreed to fulfill Kana's request and allowed her to consume the food of the gods. The demon meat in his hand glowed, which surprised the wolf girls. As Kana put a piece of meat into her mouth, the swordsman told her to make a wish while she ate. After tasting the food of the gods, she barely managed not to spit it out at Sumeraga's insistence. She noted that the taste was awful and wondered what was wrong with the gods' preferences. The swordsman simply told her to hurry up and make a wish. She asked to be granted the power of spatial temporal magic, which would return them to the world they came from. A circle formed around the team. Clouds in the shape of foxes enveloped them, and the wolf girls admired what was happening. One of the fox-shaped clouds wrapped around Kana, and she uttered the words about returning to their world. In an empty white space, a voice addressed Temaz. It asked about the hero's awakening. To this, Temaz replied that there had been no signals. The voice continued, saying that they had failed this time too, and a new batch of heroes would be summoned. Temaz bowed, then stood up. He pondered the awakening. Temaz thought that heroes from another world would be able to awaken, but they were all below level 100. He decided to gather all the useless heroes and sacrifice them to summon a new batch. Temaz turned out to be an old man with a staff. Kana urged her friends to return to their world. She was able to activate her magic. However, the swordsman found himself in a completely different place. The surroundings had an Eastern atmosphere, somewhat resembling the grounds of a traditional temple in Japan. But the swordsman realized that this was neither the wolf forest nor Japan. A greeting was heard from behind, causing him to spin around. He noticed his katana was missing, but he was assured there was no cause for concern. The person who appeared said they weren't an enemy. Sumeragi then asked who they were. The girl introduced herself as Harumi no Mikoto, a deity of Japan and one of its pillars. Sukuru was annoyed, saying he didn't care who she was. All he cared about was where this place was and where his companions were. The deity explained that this was her garden and that she hadn't done anything to Kana or the others. She had only summoned him at the last moment before his return. She had a few requests for the swordsman. She went on to say that as a deity, she knew absolutely everything about all living creatures inhabiting Japan. She knew what happened when Sukuru was summoned to this world with 107 classmates. The swordsman was again indignant that she knew everything that happened to them but didn't intervene. They suddenly found themselves in a tea house. She clarified that it wasn't that she didn't do anything, she simply couldn't intervene. She continued, explaining that if she canceled the summoning, all the energy would lose its purpose and spiral out of control. This could cause a dimensional explosion and destroy all of Japan. Sukuru, sitting at the table, listened to her in silence. Not only Japan, but even the Earth's core could be affected. It would be the end of all life on Earth. The swordsman grumbled, saying she was telling him this story just so he would believe her. She confirmed it. That's why she allowed him to come to this world and even managed to bless the swordsman. The swordsman thought about the message indicating the blessing had been removed, but that wasn't all. She noted that he possessed unimaginable abilities for a chef. Originally, all the techniques he had shouldn't have been so powerful. She was delighted that her blessing had glitched Tsukuru's skills, making them overpowered. Sumeragi was surprised by how suddenly the deity's personality changed, but he was still unhappy about all the difficulties he had to overcome. The deity explained that otherwise his body and mind wouldn't have been able to handle it, and he would have exploded. Because of this, Hiromino had to adjust the blessing to the swordsman's level. After saying he understood the reason for his abilities, the swordsman asked what else was required of him. The deity replied that she wanted no one from this world to be able to summon people from Tsukuru's world. She began to complain that people from this world had torn a huge hole in the spacetime fabric and were dragging people away by the hundreds. A large hole could destroy the world, and it was a major headache for the gods. Therefore, the deity stated her request to destroy all objects and writings related to summoning from other dimensions. The swordsman remembered how he ended up here and realized that the power was given to him to destroy them. He agreed to the request, which made the deity happy, but the swordsman asked what he would be rewarded with for this. This surprised Hirom, but the swordsman repeated his question about a reward. The deity asked if blessings weren't enough of a reward, as she had worked so hard to raise his level. Tsukuru thanked her for that, but noted that her request was a completely different matter. To this, the deity called him a meanie. Sumeragi sipped his tea and remarked that it was delicious, unlike the god's food, which was disgusting. Meanwhile, the deity was saying she couldn't help and shouldn't, but just this once, she would make an exception. The deity held a sphere depicting Ayumi and promised to reveal something interesting about her. The swordsman jumped up from his seat, asking what his sister had to do with it. The deity avoided the question, stating that she would talk about everyone who had been summoned. The swordsman persisted. Hirom continued speaking, but this time about Kana. She said that Kana would master spacetime magic very soon, and Tsukuru would be able to return home. He must not allow any of his classmates to come back here. He wanted to know why, but the deity simply told him to just think about it. She explained that 108 people were involved in this incident. She not only had to close the rift, but also go back in time to erase all traces of their presence in this world. That's why once Kana masters space and time magic, he must not let anyone return. Records of their existence have been erased. They have no place to go back to. The swordsman asked if that meant they would have to live in this world because there was no point in returning. The deity confirmed it. Tsukuru hadn't considered this, remembering Kana, who promised to bring him back, and Ayumi, who hoped to meet again. He asked the deity what would happen if someone wanted to return despite everything about them being erased. The deity replied that she couldn't restore what was already erased, but she could create new records. She asked him to call her when the time came. The swordsman cursed the deity for using him, but Hirom laughed and noted that she couldn't interfere in this world's affairs, and he was nothing without her blessings, so they should help each other. She cupped his face in her hands and said she was counting on him. Tsukuru slowly opened his eyes. Sanya was overjoyed that they were back in the wolf forest and hugged her sister tightly. Nearby, the team noticed a group of people approaching them. The people apologized for not being able to stop Crafton, but Auntie A assured them that everything was fine as long as they were safe. Sumeragi thought about the deity. She had discarded him as soon as their conversation ended. He remembered the sphere that depicted his sister. He wanted to know what she had wanted to tell him about Ayumi. While the swordsman was lost in thought, Kana approached him to make sure he was all right. He brushed her off, saying he was thinking about trivial things. He told Kana to go rest before the side effects of the god's food kicked in. Kana agreed. Their dialogue was interrupted by someone calling for the sorceress. The swordsman once again thought about his sister. He didn't care about the fate of his classmates, but it was different when it came to just one person, Suzyun. The side effect of the god's food was that Kana lost her hearing, but overall she was fine. Her companions decided to rest until her hearing recovered. Meanwhile, Auntie A spoke with the local residents who had allowed Crafton to escape. About a month had passed since the disappearance. The elf praised the residents for guarding the forest well. Someone slipped. The fallen person broke the arched gate that had just been repaired. Everyone's gaze turned to the source of the noise. The noise was caused by two ancient beings, Duke, an ancient dwarf, and Kobaru, an ancient animagus. A status window appeared next to the creatures. Kobaru began to explain how terrified she was when Antie's aura disappeared. The forest and village were almost destroyed. After listening, the elf thanked them for their protection. It had been difficult for all the tribes then, and they had almost fought amongst themselves. But upon the elf's return, the ancient beings had to go back to their homeland because human problems would soon affect their homeland too. This surprised the swordsman. He turned to the dwarf and the animagus, asking what had happened. Duke whispered that it all happened after Crafton left. Crafton was screaming and smashing everything around him, furious. He was angry at Tsukuru for being so strong that he took his second life. He suspected Temaz of forming an alliance with Aisha and sending Sumeragi. He believed Temaz had outsmarted them. Crafton cursed. He called for Kompinen, who then arrived. He ordered a declaration of war against Temaz, even if it meant involving demons. Suzuna leaned against the table, her hands trembling. She couldn't get the beastman out of her head, who had tearfully begged her to save the child in his arms. She remembered the funeral and her brother. The girl covered her face with her hands. Even if she was considered a hero or a saint, she couldn't do anything but heal. She thought about how she lacked the strength to wield a weapon and the courage to go against the will of the locals and escape. She had always been protected while she cried. The girl longed for her parents. There was a knock at the door, and a voice called out to her. It was Mickey, who had come to invite her friend to dinner. The brunette refused, citing a lack of appetite, but Mickey insisted, saying that she needed to eat or she might get sick. The girls went down the stairs, discussing what they would have for dinner. Mickey wondered what kind of meat they could use for steak. A strange atmosphere hung downstairs. Someone pointed at a man. In the center stood a guy, and next to him was a bunny girl. The young man who pointed at him commented that Kariyama Kaido had bought another child slave. Kariyama himself was pleased with the fact that he could buy slaves simply by selling materials from the dungeons. Kaido was asked what happened to the child he bought before. The guy just brushed it off, saying Mickey could figure it out herself. Mickey labeled him the worst, but Kariyama merely offered the bunny girl to go to his room and he would wash her. The bunny girl was grabbed by the arm. Suzuno grabbed the child, trying to protect her. She suspiciously asked what he was going to do with this child and where he had put the previous ones. He just cursed and snatched the slave from the girl's hands. He held the girl close, saying he didn't care what anyone said. Whoever bought a slave had complete power over them. He expressed that after they were suddenly transported to this world, it was only fair that he should enjoy himself. Unlike Suzuna, he was adapting to this world instead of whining and crying. He reproached the girl for the words she had said to him. He told her it was time to face reality. Mika and the guy standing next to them lunged at him. A quarrel broke out. They accused Kaido of being the worst. A knight entered and asked what all the noise was about. A bell rang, surprising everyone in the hall. Knights and officials burst in, announcing that giants and demons had invaded their territory and that the heroes needed to go fight them. Hasty preparations began. A war was brewing between humans and the alliance of two tribes. Everything was being loaded into wagons. Suzuna thought about the invasion, wondering if war always started so suddenly. They had been told they were summoned to defeat the demon lord, and now they were being sent to the battlefield. She was scared. She wondered what she should do as she watched Temaz talk to the guy with glasses. Mickey promised to protect her. The girl was frightened by her friend's words. It sounded like she was talking as if she was going to die, but Mickey dispelled her fears. She pointed out that only Suzuna and a couple of other people could heal, and if she died, everyone else would die too. Her friend encouraged her by saying that he and their other classmates had been training with the knights. They asked her to heal them if they got injured. They trusted her. This touched the girl. She decided she wouldn't just stand by, as she was the only one who could heal wounds. She asked her friends to count on her. She wouldn't cry anymore. They would get through this together. In the hall, an official was reporting news from the front to Temaz, who was sitting on his throne. About a month had passed since the giants and demons launched their invasion. The heroes and knights were doing everything in their power, but the enemy outnumbered them. They urgently needed to ask the four tribes for help, or it would be the end for them. The scene all around was terrible: smoke and wounded knight bodies. Suzuna was horrified by it all. Wounded people were brought in from everywhere, and Suzuna healed them with her power. Unrest was already rising among the heroes. They were starting to think it would be better to surrender. But Hideo Kuds had a different opinion. He thought it was a bad idea because there was no guarantee they would be spared. They would die either by fleeing or by fighting. He pulled a packet from his pocket. Inside were pills. According to Cuds, the high priest had given them to him. They were like boosters to increase strength. Everyone started to complain that he had hidden them until now. Hideo explained that they couldn't be used thoughtlessly. They worked for 10 hours, but afterward the person would lose the ability to move. Everyone wanted to take a pill. Miki also asked for one, but Fujisaki stopped her, saying she was an archer and the front line was better left to them. At that moment, Cuds addressed him, asking the warrior to use his berserk skill. Those who received the pills decided to use them to destroy their enemies and swallowed them. They immediately felt their strength increase. A group of 10 people rushed into battle. Mika said she would provide cover, but Cuds was against it. He said that the remaining people should retreat. Mika was stunned. He declared that he wasn't going to fight for those who had kidnapped them. It would be a completely different story if they were in Japan and needed to protect their families. A seed of doubt was sown all around. Everyone thought, indeed, why should we fight? We have no reason. They considered hiding in some village. Mika, however, asked why he had given them those strength-enhancing pills then. Cuds indifferently stated that the pills turned people into berserk warriors who would fight until they ran out of strength. Fujisaki noticed something strange. He hadn't taken his pill, saving it for an emergency. His comrades had turned into berserkers, and nearby, he saw girls surrounded by demons. He cut down one demon and asked the girls where the other guys were. Mika immediately explained that they had been used as bait. Fujisaki warned them that they needed to escape from there, but Suzune pleaded with him to come with them. An old classmate attacked them. The swordsman was surprised to see it was Sarayama. The swordsman urged the girls to run one last time. They fled through the forest, fending off demons. They followed the tracks, certain they would catch up to those who had retreated. Mika cursed Cuds, threatening to punch him as soon as she saw him. At that moment, Suzune stumbled. Suzune asked Mika to leave her and catch up with the others. The brunette immediately rejected the request, stating that she would rather die herself than abandon her friend. Besides, she wouldn't be able to look her friend in the eye if she did that. It infuriated her, but she understood that Cuds was right. She spoke about this as she gathered arrows. Mika asked who they were fighting for. Personally, she was fighting to protect Suzune, and Mika wanted her to stay with her and protect her. They agreed on this. Emerging from the forest, Mika said that due to the open landscape, they could easily be spotted. Suddenly, a giant appeared before them. She was enormous, as Mika noted. The giantess replied that she was still smaller than others of her kind. Suzune was surprised that she could speak, which meant they might be able to surrender. But at that moment, Mika noticed something behind the massive creature. It was those who had retreated. Mika immediately understood that they wouldn't leave them alive. The giantess smirked, seeing them point their sword at her. She provoked Mika to strike her down, promising to let them go if she did. Mika accepted the challenge. Mika drew her sword and with a shout rushed towards her opponent. The giantess skillfully dodged. The giantess attacked the girl, but she didn't have a single scratch. At the same time, Suzune was chanting a spell. She knew she couldn't attack, but she could protect her friend in another way. She would continue to cast and keep the magic active. And the moment Mika got injured, she would be able to heal her quickly. The giantess noticed Mika being healed and decided to attack Suzune. At that very instant, Mika lunged at her opponent and pierced her eye, shouting that she wouldn't let her best friend be touched. But the giantess caught the girl and threw her. Suzune rushed to her friend but was caught. She was held in a giant hand and threatened not to move. Mika was seriously injured. The brunette pleaded with the giantess to stop. But the giantess just swung her blade, ignoring the plea. This was the end. The giantess wildly swung her weapon with all her might. This all happened half a day before Ikeno's Suzune and the others engaged in battle with the giants. Tsukuru was listening to what the dwarf was telling him. The dwarf explained that for the past month, Crafton had been secretly using giants and demons to wage war against humans. Kobaru mentioned that all the beast folk had evacuated from the human lands due to the war. The swordsman asked about the summoned heroes. The animagus didn't know much about them but had heard they were going to join the war against the giants. Tsukuru was confused. He suddenly turned and headed somewhere. Antie asked where he was going. The swordsman replied that he was going to Luck's sandal. As he opened the door, he said he would return once Kana recovered, but he froze. He felt a strange sensation in the space around him. Temaz and his retinue appeared before him. This shocked the swordsman. He was about to draw his sword, but Antie intervened, asking what Temaz was doing on her territory. Tsukuru remembered that this man was the most ancient representative of the human race. At that moment, the old man addressed the elf. At first, he paused in confusion, but then he put on a show of relief for Antie. He revealed that the giants had invaded human lands immediately after attacking the elves. He had come to ask for help. This attitude from the old man surprised Sumeragi. Kobaru agreed that all races should work together, but Auntie A smirked, asking if she was supposed to believe that. She accused Temaz of giving Mjolnir to Crafton and staging their teleportation to another world. The elf noted that the old man had only further angered Crafton and hoped that Duke and Kobaru would join him. But since Auntie A was alive and well, they were out of luck. She demanded an apology for trying to harm her. If they didn't apologize, she would retaliate in kind. Temaz began to justify himself, saying that he had given the axe to the giants a long time ago so they could fight the demons, and he hadn't thought it would turn out this way. He apologized for the giants' barbarism. Auntie A accepted the apology but warned them to be careful. The swordsman was surprised by how easily she accepted the apology. Biz responded to his thoughts by explaining that this is how politics works. No one wins if they fight each other. It's better to work together against a common enemy. Still, something bothered the ghost. The ghost noted that Temaz was counting on human superiority and tried to destroy Auntie A. In his plan, one wrong step and humanity would have perished, but he took such a risk. Biz speculated that this might be related to the summoning of heroes. The swordsman asked him not to inquire further. He drew his blade and headed towards the old man and his escorts. The retinue tried to stop him. One of the knights drew his sword and aimed it at Sumeragi but lost his arm. Others stepped forward, shielding Temaz behind them. The swordsman told the old man that he couldn't let him go now. Temaz wondered what a human child was doing in such a place. He asked the swordsman if they had met before. In response, Tsukuru asked if the ancient human was suffering from senility. The swordsman hadn't forgotten a single day since that man threw him into this place. Sumeragi had dealt with the entourage and was now standing right in front of Temaz, asking if he understood him. The old man used earth magic to defend himself. His companions watched the fight. Temaz wondered if it could be him. The swordsman asked if the old man intended to fight. He noticed that Crafton surpassed the old man in both strength and speed. The young man attacked and the old man fended him off. He wanted to ask a question, but the swordsman interrupted him, stating that he was the one who had beaten Crafton. Tsukuru used his dark shackle skill, pinning the old man to the ground. But the swordsman assured him that this wasn't the end. He had trained extensively to get his revenge. He then pierced the old man's arm with his katana. The old man immediately tried to buy him off, but the swordsman wanted nothing from him. The swordsman pierced Temaz's leg and continued, saying that he was strong enough and possessed many skills he hadn't yet used on him. He then displayed his status card. Sumeragi wasn't going to simply forgive him for kidnapping people, or for the hardships and pain he had to endure because of this old man. He wanted Temaz to go through the same thing. He assured him that when he was on the verge of life and death, he would give the old man a healing dish. Suddenly, someone's hand stopped the swordsman. Kana was holding him. He turned to her. She showed him a note asking him to let the old man go. Tsukuru simply said that Kana could speak as she had only lost her hearing. At that very moment, Anthea intervened. She wanted to find out what the humans were planning. Temaz had lied to them about the appearance of the demon lord and was summoning people from another world. The old man indignantly questioned her. The old man said that they were just a nuisance. The strongest tribe capable of killing everything, the tribe of ghosts. Their existence was a hindrance in the world. Humans were trying to control it. It was only a matter of time until humans could obtain the power of light which could defeat the ghost tribe. He continued, saying that the people of this world weren't strong enough and even the summoned ones didn't possess light magic. He mentioned that he would fulfill that person's wish to rule the world. He laughed maniacally, causing confusion among everyone. Then he crumbled into dust. Sumeragi thought he had died, but his assumptions were disproven. Temaz used earth magic to escape. Now he was rapidly moving away from them. The swordsman summoned Biz, who went after the fleeing old man. Tsukuru wasn't sure if Biz would catch him. The swordsman cursed. He regretted letting him get away. He wondered who Temaz had been talking about. Was someone behind him? He opened Kana's status card. He remembered the old man talking about light magic. Kana's stats indeed had the light magic attribute. He turned away, causing Kana to worry. She apologized for interfering, but the swordsman reassured her that it wasn't her fault. He was the one who let the old man escape. He apologized for pushing the girl away. He told his comrades that he had missed opportunities to leave because of Temaz. He asked them to come with him. There were some he wanted to save. The returning Bays apologized for missing Temas. According to the ghost, he moved too fast. Tsukuru reassured him, explaining that the old man was an ancient being. Elphika suggested he might have hidden in his lair. Kabaru said she didn't quite understand what the old man was trying to do. Luke, however, noted that they knew what the humans were plotting and needed to warn their brethren so they could evacuate. The elves promised to protect the settlement. The animagus asked Antie to focus on the goal and assured her that the elves from human territory would be welcomed. Antie responded with gratitude. Hannah wanted to warn the swordsman about the route, but Sumeragi replied that he wasn't going to drag things out. He decided to summon a magic carpet using an equivalent exchange. Kana was surprised by the magical item. The swordsman explained that there was a fairy tale about it in his world. The team flew on the magic carpet at high speed. Sanya and Kana almost fell off. After that, the sorceress used wind magic to lessen the wind current. An open landscape unfolded before them. It was a battlefield. They witnessed a battle between several individuals who no longer looked human. The swordsmen opened their status cards. Their stats were strange, as if under some kind of fusion. It was also odd that not all heroes were involved. Tsukuru used his presence detection skill. The skill detected movement. In the distance, a giantess swung her sword. The giantess, saying this is the end, struck the ground with her blade. A pillar of dust rose around them. She was breathing heavily, holding Suzune in her large palm. The girl was crying. The giantess sniffed and noticed something. Someone was standing before her. The giantess asked who was before her. It was Tsukuru, who had deflected her attack aimed at Miki. Suzune recognized him. The swordsman called the giantess an old hag, demanding she release the brunette and return with her kin. Hannah landed next to him. The wolf girl asked Miki to eat the food on the saucer. A piece of food was placed in the girl's mouth. The giantess watched silently as her brethren approached. They reproached her for hesitating. They said that a small human was before her and there was no need to think twice about destroying him. The giantess asked the swordsman if their army should simply retreat. The two other giants were indignant that she was negotiating with a human. To this, she told them to shut their mouths. She asked her comrades if they could determine his strength. She added that the swordsman had killed Crafton and could kill them instantly if he wished. Tsukuru smirked, saying she had a sharp eye. She simply explained that she couldn't let her sons die. At that moment, the swordsman realized she was a mother. He then released the girl. Suzune glanced back at the giantess and rushed towards Miki, but she stumbled and fell into Sumeraga's arms. She looked up at her friend, who was now completely healed. The girl anxiously asked if Miki and Tsukuru were alive. The swordsman replied that he had promised to meet them again. The girl hugged him, tears streaming down her face. She cried about how scared she had been and how much she had missed him. This shocked his companions. She apologized for not being able to help him, for just watching everything from the sidelines. She hadn't realized this world was such a terrifying place. Tsukuru comforted his friend, telling her it wasn't her fault and that she was the one who had always worried about him. They reminisced about the past. She wanted to say something else but then lost consciousness. Someone anxiously asked if she needed regeneration. The swordsman reassured them. The giantess decided to ask if they knew where Temas was. She couldn't return empty-handed. Sumeragi replied that he wished he knew too. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over them. Antie explained that it was the impact of Catabalpaz's death. This feeling affected everyone, including Crafton and Temas. A new type of ancient demon appeared. It was in a cave, absorbing Catabalpaz's memories. It saw that demons were pathetic even after its disappearance. But that time had come to an end. Now that it had acquired new power, everyone would know the true might of demons. It screamed that vengeance would find Crafton and Temas. The demons heeded its call. The demons, who had been riding on the giants' backs, jumped off and aimed their weapons at the giants. The giants wondered what had happened and why the demons were now against them. A sudden attack struck one of the giants. Blood gushed out. The ancient demon continued its monologue, stating that it would burn to ashes everyone who had scorned them. Meanwhile, Tsukuru and the others watched, not understanding what was happening. As the demons attacked one of the giants and began to tear into it, Antie explained that after Catabalpaz's death, a new demonic race, similar to the ancient demons, had emerged. The demons broke free from the giants' control and began attacking them. This changed the situation on the battlefield. At this time, the deserting heroes watched as the giants and demons began fighting each other. After that, the giants retreated. The people led by Cuds thought the war would end and they wouldn't have to fight anymore, but Cuds himself found it hard to believe. They had fought desperately, lost comrades, and it all ended so suddenly. The people rejoiced at this outcome. It meant they were free. They were tired of following orders. Hideo confirmed that they could be free, but he wasn't entirely sure himself. Kariyama was laughing at the giants who were currently fighting demons and risking their lives. Kaido thought he would be welcomed as a hero upon his return. He dreamed of coming back and finally having some fun with the Beast Girl Bunny. He regretted that the sudden war had messed up his plans. Kariyama believed he would be able to make up for lost time, but then a giant's enormous foot loomed over him. He stared at it in horror. Meanwhile, in Luck's sandal, a small slave girl was brought some food. She jumped with joy. The person who brought it lamented that she didn't understand the country's situation and that slaves outside were dying of exhaustion. But then again, how could she know? The man wondered how much longer he would have to do this. Before leaving, Kaido had insisted that the child be fed 3 times a day and spoiled with treats. The caretaker was already dreaming of the moment the child's owner would return, though he wasn't sure if he actually would. The bunny happily munched on the bread. Suzuna was having a nightmare about Miki getting injured. At that moment, Miki herself was sitting next to her friend, who was crying in her sleep. Suzuna finally came to. She was happy to see her friend alive and well. The girl hugged Miki. The brunette told her friend how Hana had healed her. Suzuna asked who Hana was. Hana assumed they were talking about her, but she had simply given the brunette the food of the gods. Kana appeared from behind the wolf girl and announced that she had taken care of Suzuna's wounds and applied a cleansing spell. The girl noticed that her wounds were indeed gone. The brunette thanked her and clarified that they were with Tsukuru. The sorceress introduced herself. Suzuna asked if they were friends with the swordsman. The wolf girl and the sorceress replied that they were his slaves. This angered Suzuna, who grabbed Sumeragi. She compared him to Kuriyama, but the swordsman explained that while the girl was asleep, he had cleared things up with Hain Miki. Hana and Kana explained that Tsukuru had appeared during difficult moments in their lives and had helped them greatly. Suzuna understood the situation. The girls asked about the situation on the front lines. She replied that after the demon uprising, the giants had scattered and were now all in the wolf forest. They immediately asked if it was dangerous there, but the elf assured them that she had placed artifacts that scare away monsters, so it was safe. Auntie was touched by Suzuna. The brunette was amazed by the elf's beauty. They introduced themselves. Auntie briefly explained how she met Sumeragi. He killed her. This shocked Suzuna. The swordsman asked Auntie not to complicate things. The sorceress asked about Suzuna's relationship with her master. Miki intervened, saying that Tsukuru was Suzuna's boyfriend. This made everyone embarrassed, and Kana was in shock. The embarrassed brunette asked them not to listen to her friend and said that she and Sumeragi were childhood friends. But Miki continued to tease, saying that the brunette constantly talked about him. Kana concluded understandingly that they were childhood friends, but then chided that her master was happy. The swordsman denied this. Someone returned to the group. It was Sanya with a captured boar. She wanted to feed it to her master's friend. Seeing her, Suzuna thought it was Ayumi. The brunette began to ask her how she ended up there. Suzuna almost let slip that Ayumi had died, but continued to say that she had seen the body at the funeral. The swordsman echoed his sister's name, remembering that he had also called Sanya that when he first saw her. The swordsman decided to explain that Sanya resembled his sister, Ayumi. He told the story that after his parents died, he was adopted by his father's best friend. Ayumi was the daughter of this best friend, so they weren't related. Suzuna said that he got along well with them. Tsukuru agreed. But in the end, they died in a car accident. Kana finally understood why the swordsman was so surprised when he first saw Sanya. He thought he was looking at Ayumi, but Sanya didn't recognize him. In fact, she had been under Hana's care since birth. Hana stated that everything about Sanya, including her scent, confirmed she was from her tribe. Suzune suggested that the young girl bore a striking resemblance to Ayumi. Sanya herself claimed she had only recently met Sumeragi. She was born to a half-wolf and had been with Hana ever since. Later, she served Count Faisal, where she was mistreated. She tried to protect a maid who had broken an antique vase and was thrown into the dungeon for it, but Hana rescued her, and that's when she met her master. However, Tsukuru didn't understand. Hirum's words about his sister kept bothering him. If a deity spoke of her, there had to be a connection. He had no other leads. But to get an answer, he needed to complete Hurum's task, and he needed to do it as quickly as possible. Suddenly, Biz appeared, startling Mickey and Suzyun. The swordsman asked if he had found the old man. The ghost replied that he had. He also brought a guest. It was Alteria's. She greeted everyone. Everyone was unexpectedly surprised by Alteria's appearance. She decided to start the conversation right away. Suzyun summarized that Alteria's was the first person the swordsman met after passing through the gate. She was the former mistress of Kana and the others. The cat girl said she was happy to see everyone and hadn't expected them to settle in the wolf forest. She noted that they could have asked her to share land. The swordsman replied that he had made this mansion his base. Suzyun was surprised. The swordsman demonstrated by summoning a teddy bear using equivalent exchange. The brunette was charmed. The swordsman decided to find out what Alteria's was doing there. It turned out the reason was that a fiancé had been found for her. She told her father that she would only marry the strongest and then ran away. This shocked Kana. She didn't know how to interpret it. She thought Alteria's meant the strongest of the knights. Besides that, she was interested in knowing what was happening in the world. If Alteria's father got involved in this matter, people would start to worry. She decided to clarify if they were connected to it. After listening, Alteria's understood why the elves, beastmen, and dwarves who lived in human lands had come to the wolf forest. According to her, Algeria was also accepting refugees. The swordsman stated that Algeria was safe because their knights were trained by him personally. The cat girl agreed, but also noted that neighboring countries needed to be considered. They couldn't focus solely on defending other countries. Otherwise, it would become a display of force, and peaceful relations could be forgotten. Auntie A was indignant. She felt there was sarcasm in Alteria's words, but the cat girl countered that they didn't want to go to war. She assured Sumeragi that she wanted to get revenge on Temaz and was confident she could be useful to him. At the same time, her people wanted to protect their land and its inhabitants without the knight's help. Both sides would benefit from weakening the human race. Sanya wondered how they could achieve this. The cat responded that they needed to destroy them from within. Alteria's then asked Sumeragi a question. He had the ability to summon Biz, a spirit summoning skill. She wanted to know if the swordsman could summon a doppelganger. Tsukuru repeated the spirit's name, asking for clarification. The cat explained that a doppelganger is a monster spirit that steals and replaces the very essence of its victim. Due to its abilities, there are almost no records of it. Kana interjected, saying she had only heard of such creatures in fairy tales and never thought they actually existed. The swordsman considered using a doppelganger to manipulate important people in a country, thereby sowing discord. Alteria's dismissed this method, stating they could achieve their goals without causing unnecessary panic. She replied that they would aim higher, replacing and taking over the representatives of various countries. According to her plan, by the time Temaz realized what was happening, he would have no support. Then, the swordsman could get his revenge. Tsukuru scoffed, calling her plan abominable, but the cat retorted that, as an aristocrat, conspiracies were her specialty. Still, she added, the plan wouldn't work without the swordsman if he couldn't summon a doppelganger. She asked for his opinion on the matter. Sumeragi immediately agreed. Mickey, who had fainted at the sight of Biz, regained consciousness. She screamed about the monster. Suzuna tried to calm her friend, explaining that it was Tsukuru's familiar. The brunette's expression turned serious as she asked where they were going. Suzuna hesitantly suggested it was another fight, but the swordsman declared they were heading to the human lands. Mickey froze. She asked to be left behind, explaining that despite the monster-repelling artifacts everywhere, the wolf forest was still unsafe. Mickey trembled, apologizing for her fear, but the mere thought of something similar happening again made her uneasy. Alteria's told the brunette she had nothing to apologize for. Mickey had done the right thing by warning them immediately. The cat suggested that her friends go to Alteria where their knights could protect them. The brunette immediately agreed that they should accept the offer, but Suzuna was hesitant. Mickey quickly told Suzuna that she would go with the swordsman and the others. The brunette tried to object, arguing that her friend would be left alone, but Mickey replied that Suzuna had been idle for too long. Mickey encouraged her friend, saying that the brunette had her healing magic and they couldn't do without her. She asked Suzuna to go with them. However, the swordsman intervened, saying it would be better to think it over again, as it was a risky endeavor. Suzuna looked at her friend, pondered for a moment, and replied that she would do her best. The brunette shrieked while riding on the monster with Alteria's. Of course, she had insisted on it herself. The swordsman and the others were flying on a magic carpet. Everyone except Sanya and Tsukuru felt bad for Suzuna, but Auntie A said that since the brunette wanted to get stronger, she should be able to stand up for herself. The cat cast a spell summoning a sound wave skill, while Suzuna summoned a holy spear. As they flew freely, system windows for leveling up kept popping up endlessly. The swordsman used his spirit summoning skill and a doppelganger appeared. A status card popped up next to him and Tsukuru named him Israfil. He ordered the spirit to conquer all countries where human supremacy reigned. The swordsman didn't want to spare anyone as they had all despised him. He recalled Alteria's words about how if they captured one gate, they could capture all the other countries and consequently take control. The swordsman hadn't thought the gates would turn out to be so useful. He noted that the cat was smart and far-sighted, and he savored the thought of getting revenge on Temasu. Biz appeared and reported that he had found Suzuna's classmates, some of whom had survived. However, words were heard from behind that the city would become a hero's camp, and someone ordered them to lie down. The classmates started to rebel, believing that the people of this world had summoned them on a whim and refused to be cannon fodder. Now, it was the residents' turn to do whatever the heroes wanted. The swordsman completely disagreed with their rebellion but perfectly understood their feelings. Biz awaited his command. The swordsman ordered them to be left alone. It would be problematic if a brawl broke out and Temasu found out about it. He warned the ghost not to tell Suzuna and Miki about the encounter and told him to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Miki was visiting Alteria and started throwing things. The maid nervously asked her not to do such things because she was a guest. The brunette wondered how her friend was doing. Meanwhile, the brunette was recovering after riding a monster. She noted that the training in Lux's sandal was much easier, but Alteria's assured her that every knight had to go through this. Hannah approved of her work. Status cards popped up for both the cat and the brunette. They had achieved their goal. The girls were happy with their success. At that moment, the swordsman appeared and realized that the training was over. The excited brunette didn't know what to say to him, and the cat decided to ask what to do next. Sanya exclaimed that they needed to eat something delicious. Suzuna was touched by the opportunity to eat sushi in this world. The swordsman said he had been to the port and bought fresh seafood. Meanwhile, a skill upgrade notification popped up before the brunette's eyes. She explained that this happened due to her cooking mastery and that she could learn skills by eating monster meat. Sanya strictly ordered Alteria's and Suzuna to eat everything. Kana wished them a good appetite. Tsukuru couldn't imagine so many people eating the food he prepared. At that moment, Suzuna said it made her nostalgic and that she wanted to return to her parents as soon as possible. The swordsman then remembered his conversation with the deity, where she spoke of erased birth records for kidnapped people, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her such terrible news. Biz continued his investigation, which led him to a deserted area. A figure appeared before him. The swordsman sensed that something had happened to the ghost. Everyone turned to look at him. He said that something had happened to Biz. They were approaching the desolate area where Biz was located. They arrived in a land not found on any map, the land of death, a place where only ghosts could live. Kana asked if Biz was truly there. The swordsman replied that he could sense his presence. He pointed in a direction and dashed off. He drew his katana and sliced through the air. Ghosts emerged from everywhere. Sanya declared that she would deal with them. However, the wolf girl couldn't defeat the ghosts. As Anthea said, "You can't kill what's already dead." Suzuna used holy magic and the ghosts stopped approaching them. They found themselves in an area covered with boulders. Here, Sumeragi lost track of Biz's presence. Stone monuments stood before them. Sanya suggested it might be a treasure map. The elf tried to calm the wolf girl, but the beastkin noticed something. After reading the inscription, Suzuna said it was in Japanese. The other girls asked if it was the language from the swordsman's original world. However, the inscription puzzled Brunette and Sumeragi, while the others didn't understand their confusion. A discussion about the inscription began. They wondered who had engraved the name of a dish and why. Kana asked what kind of food it was. The swordsman replied that he would cook it for her next time. Sanya was bewildered. Alterius felt sorry for the poor girl who was apparently hungry. Anthea said there was no point in discussing things they didn't understand. Tsukuru agreed and suggested they continue searching for Biz. A Cerberus crept up on them. A status window appeared next to it. It asked who had invaded its master's lands. Everyone stared at the three-headed dog. The swordsman scoffed, noting they were receiving a warm welcome. The dog roared and threatened to eliminate the intruders. It unleashed streams of energy from its mouths, raising a pillar of dust. Hannah decided to attack. She delivered blow after blow, and the dog couldn't track her maneuvers at all. The Cerberus called Hannah an arrogant mutt, but she refuted his words, stating she was a wolf right before her final attack. The dog was knocked out, and Alterius praised the wolf girl. Just then, the dog began to crumble, and Biz appeared in its place. Kana and Suzuno were happy to see him, but Sumeragi stopped them. Something was wrong with him. At his call, crow ghosts flew in. Everyone dodged them. Biz attacked the swordsman. During the fight, the swordsman asked if Biz thought he could win, but the ghost urged him to leave. Biz then threw Sumeragi aside. NTA declared that she would stop Biz and told the swordsman to press on. A fortress stood ahead. The elf stated that she knew who was controlling the ghost. She also knew who was beyond this place. The swordsman had already infiltrated the fortress, slicing through space with his katana, but darkness stopped his blade. The swordsman realized he couldn't free his blade from the black mist. He began to understand what this place and presence truly were. Undead creatures then lunged at him. He cut them down. However, his katana was once again ensnared by the black mist. Someone called the swordsman by name. A dark figure appeared before Sumeragi, threatening to destroy all armies beyond this world. The ghost expressed surprise that his brethren had caused such a commotion, noting that this time only one human child had appeared.